A girl named Marceau thought that sometimes there are times when everything goes completely differently than you would like or as planned. At such moments, Marceau sincerely tried to control herself, but in the end, she decided that it would be better to give up. Luckily, there was someone nearby who was always on her side. Darcy was only worried about whether Marceau herself would regret her decision. Darcy vowed to Marceau to always stay by her side, no matter whether she decided to run away or stay and fight, but he chose to clarify whether the girl was sure of her choice. Marceau told Darcy that he himself had told her earlier that she might well do just that. Darcy smiled and replied that he simply wished Marceau happiness, which was why he was worried, after which he extended his hand to the girl. Marceau looked at Darcy hesitantly, trying to figure out if she would really be happy if she left everything as it was and walked away. Marceau thought back to the people who made her feel so broken and tired now. Marceau tried to hold on to them, tried to change for them, but in the end, it led to nothing. Marceau thought that she had nothing left to lose, smiled, put her hand in Darcy's hand and replied that she was completely confident in what she was doing. For herself, Marceau realized that the person who most needed her care was not someone else, but herself. It all started when one girl found herself in her favorite book story, but in a very unpleasant character, which is why she had to apologize first of all to Le Huan, to whom Marceau had previously caused many offenses. It seemed that this could fix everything, especially considering that Le Huan immediately forgave Marceau. Le Huan was a very kind person. She said that she was very happy that Marceau opened up to her and invited her to become friends. Marceau was sincerely grateful to Le Huan for her kindness and for offering her friendship, but not everyone around was like Le Huan. Rumors about Marceau's bad character had already spread around. Even children laughed at her because she allegedly tried to steal the prince from Le Huan. Marceau's maid reacted very sharply to the ridicule of children and anyone else, but the girl herself took it calmly. Marceau knew that she was not the person to whom these taunts were really directed. Marceau thought that she could easily change people's opinions of her if she just did more good deeds, especially considering that she knew what was going to happen in the future. Marceau thought that if she could prove that she had changed, she could change the plotline of the story in a big way. Marceau believed this when she tried to take Le Huan and the prince off the balcony, because she knew that an attempt was about to be made on Le Huan's life. She failed to convince Le Huan and the prince to leave, but the arrow hit Marceau herself, which seemed like a positive thing to the girl. Marceau thought that at least in this way she had been able to save Le Huan. But hopes for the best were dashed at the very moment when Marceau heard that people were talking about this incident. High society could not accept that the one they considered a villain could change. High society did not believe that Marceau could really save Le Huan. Some believed that she did it only to attract attention to herself, while others thought that she herself organized the assassination attempt. Some thought the circumstances were ironic for Marceau, who was wounded while trying to take Le Huan's place next to the prince. Marceau tried her best, but any action she took with Le Huan was always misinterpreted. Even if she was just helping the girl put on her coat, people suspected her of envying Le Huan's outfits and of hidden sarcasm. The story of this world logically revolved around Le Huan. She was the main character, and although Le Huan herself treated Marceau well, the people around her were in no hurry to follow her example. Prince Ryan and the Knight Commander Kaiser, who was secretly in love with Le Huan, tried to protect the innocent girl from the evil bitch Marceau. No matter how hard Marceau tried, no matter what she did, she was still hated, and she always remained the one to blame for everyone. When Marceau was thinking that she was very tired from all this stress, Le Huan invited her for a walk. Marceau wanted to spend some time alone, but she couldn't refuse Le Huan, who was now talking excitedly about how Marceau had looked very tired and gloomy lately. Le Huan said that for this reason she decided that Marceau needed to get some fresh air. Marceau thanked Le Huan for her concern and did not tell the girl that she would prefer to spend time in her room rather than in the fresh air. Marceau thought that perhaps she still wanted to hope that everything would get better. At that moment, Le Huan reached for the water, seeing something in the pond. Le Huan lost her balance and fell into the water. Marceau was scared for the girl who couldn't swim and jumped in after her. Marceau jumped into the water and helped Le Huan get out onto the shore. A worried Kaiser ran up to the girls and began to examine Le Huan with concern. Lejuan assured Kaiser that she was fine and that Marceau had helped her, but this caused an extremely negative reaction from the man. Kaiser was absolutely certain that Marceau had deliberately arranged for Lejuan to fall into the water. Without bothering to figure it out or listen to Lejuan, Kaiser dragged Marceau, who was still dripping with water, to Ryan. Without giving Marceau a chance to say a word, Kaiser told Ryan that Marceau had hugged Lejuan, after which the girl had fallen into the water. Ryan didn't listen to Marceau either. He said that Lejuan shouldn't have let Marceau get close to her. Ryan asked if Marceau really believed that if she got rid of Lejuan, she could get closer to him. Marceau wondered in her mind why no one believed her, while Ryan continued to belittle her and tell her what a terrible person she was. Ryan said that if a woman is deprived of love, then she herself is to blame, after which he began to tell that he had tolerated Marceau for a very long time, but now his patience had come to an end. Marceau lowered her head and realized that she had had enough, because no matter what she did, the result was the same. Tears were streaming from Marceau's eyes. The girl tried not to pay attention to it and said that she would no longer do anything for Lejuan, would not see her, would not attend events, would simply lock herself in her home and atone for her sins. Ryan wanted to stop Marceau, but the girl ran out of the room, not wanting to hear anything bad about herself anymore. Ryan thought unhappily that Marceau had always been too eccentric. Marceau thought that people might think she was a coward, but right now she didn't care at all. Marceau ran up to the carriage, where a maid was waiting for her, who immediately became concerned because the girl was soaking wet. Marceau took the towel handed to her and said that she was very angry with Ryan, which is why she promised him not to leave her house anymore. The maid asked how exactly Marceau intended to carry out his threat. Marceau replied that she was the daughter of a rich and noble family, so she could easily afford to settle down at home and throw money around. And it turned out to be the best decision Marceau could have ever made. Lying relaxed on the bed, Marceau thought that she was no longer going to do anything to change the plot. She was really going to live a happy life with the cat. Everyone else's problems didn't bother her anymore. At least Marceau tried to convince herself of that. Marceau was calmly drinking tea. There was no Ryan nearby, who never tried to listen to the girl, nor Lejuan, who simply did not know how to pay attention to the atmosphere that arose around Marceau next to her. Marceau wondered why she had put up with all this for so long. The only thing that worried Marceau was how to organize her leisure time so that she wouldn't be bored sitting alone at home. Marceau knew that, unlike her world, there was no internet, phones, or computers here, but thinking about these devices gave Marceau an idea. Marceau quickly turned to her maid, Letty, to help her realize this idea. Marceau knew she couldn't create electronics here, but there was magic in this world, so she needed a merchant of enchanted items. Such items were created by processing arcanium stones, carriages that ran without horses, and dictaphones were just a few examples of enchanted items. All it took was to give arcanium stones to sorcerers, and they could create anything. But this technology was not developed well enough due to the cost of the stones, the dependence on the sorcerer's abilities, and other people's prejudices. The magicians really didn't like the fact that someone could use magic, even through things without their personal presence. Moreover, the people considered these objects dangerous, especially considering that the emperor and the nobility alike condemned enchanted objects and spread misinformation about them. Marceau couldn't understand how anyone could be cursed through a simple voice recorder, and she was planning to increase the family's wealth by investing in enchanted items. Marceau knew that Lejuan and Ryan would soon be using the enchanted carriage, causing the demand for enchanted items to skyrocket. In the original storyline, in the future, the imperial family, which is ruled by wizards, received enormous profits from making enchanted items, and also used them to suppress wizards. Eventually, high-ranking magicians succumbed to the temptation of great wealth and began to create more enchanted devices. Marceau believed that she could well have time to prepare for this. While Marceau was remembering how exactly this story should have continued, a stranger suddenly appeared in front of her. This man appeared out of nowhere. She was expecting a merchant, but she didn't yet understand how exactly to treat such an appearance. The merchant greeted him with a smile and sat down in front of Marceau, while the girl thought that such teleportation required considerable skill from the sorcerer. And although Marceau understood this, she did not understand why this man behaved so informally around her. Marceau's displeasure, however, was destroyed the moment the man removed his hood. Marceau was not prepared to see such a handsome young man in front of her. The man introduced himself as a merchant magician, Darcy, but Marceau couldn't believe that there was such a handsome man in this story that she didn't know about. Marceau thought that Darcy could even be called more handsome than Ryan. Marceau thought that Darcy was like a beautiful flower hiding behind a seductive facade, but it seemed to her that he was ready at any moment to kill his victim with his poison. Marceau, unable to control herself, muttered that Darcy was too handsome to be a mere extra in this story. Darcy, hearing Marceau's words, said that he was just a merchant and asked what exactly the word extras meant. Marceau was taken aback, realizing that because Darcy had caught her off guard, she had blurted out something unnecessary. Trying to pull herself together, Marceau asked if Darcy knew who exactly was in front of him, since the man continued to address her too informally, but it turned out that Darcy was perfectly aware of who exactly he had come to. There was an awkward silence at the table, and Marceau thought that the reason for Darcy's behavior was clearly not his ignorance. Darcy explained that he hated to speak formally to nobles and asked Marceau to be understanding about this. Darcy said he didn't understand why people were so fixated on social status when they were all the same. Marceau thought that this style of speech suited Darcy well, and she was glad to meet here a man with views close to modern ones. Marceau was infuriated by class society, so she replied that Darcy could talk to her absolutely freely. After this, Marceau asked how exactly Darcy got into her house. The man explained that he teleported with the help of an object that he himself had enchanted, which shocked Marceau. The girl knew perfectly well how much effort this might require. Darcy was definitely talented. Marceau was sure of that. Marceau chose to get straight to the point and said she had a few things she wanted from Darcy. Darcy asked how much exactly Marceau was willing to spend on this, and the girl replied that 5 billion gold pieces would be a good start. Darcy grinned and wondered what exactly a noblewoman and the only daughter of the Marquis of Étoile might need. The suspicion with which Darcy's question sounded was quite logical, given the attitude of the nobility towards enchanted things. Marceau thought that in any case, it was all for the sake of her happy life outside this society, so the girl, smiling, showed Darcy a schematic drawing of a device that could record and show video. The first project that Marceau was to begin her life in solitude with was a movie theater. But Marceau definitely didn't want to stop there, so after a couple of minutes, Darcy was shown other drawings, after which the man left the girl. Darcy felt dark and creepy. All he could hear was the soldier's footsteps. He had been locked in the castle for 10 long years, although sometimes he was allowed to go out for walks to drown out his feelings of guilt. It was a very ridiculous gesture, but it was thanks to this gesture that Darcy learned that Marceau needed a dealer in enchanted items. The guards were so careful to make sure Darcy didn't leave his room, but in the end they didn't even notice when he wasn't there. The man found it ironic. Darcy thought that in this dilapidated castle, only his room was the place he could call his own. As Darcy pulled off his tie and shirt, he thought that Marceau was not at all what he had imagined. He thought he would have to threaten the girl, but in the end, she interested him. Darcy found it hard to believe that the noblewoman would really be interested in enchanted things, but Marceau was, moreover, she needed it to create comfortable conditions for living at home locked up. This was curious for Darcy because he, on the contrary, was trying to break free from the cage. In fact, he had received from Marceau everything he needed. He now had the arcanium. All that was left was to conduct some research. Darcy looked at himself in the mirror. The man thought that people's fear of his multicolored eyes could be useful. Darcy sat down leisurely on the sofa and lit a cigarette. A guard entered the room and noted that this time the man had been taking a bath for much longer than usual. Darcy replied that the guard, as a man, should have understood him, because when you are under constant surveillance, you want to let off steam in solitude. The guard was embarrassed and hurried to leave Darcy, while the man thought that the teleportation had been quite successful this time, but he still would not have been able to move to another country from this place. Darcy pulled out the drawing of the recording device that Marceau had given him. Darcy smiled and thought that such a device was very simple to understand, but at the same time extremely innovative. He had a feeling that he would not get bored with Marceau. Marceau was lying on the bed when Letty came to her and said that she had vacated the next room and had also brought in some heavy curtains, as Marceau had requested. Marceau thanked Letty, thinking to herself that she was very glad that she had signed a contract with Darcy. Darcy was quite eccentric. He demanded that all their meetings be one-on-one, warning that otherwise he would terminate the contract with Marceau. Marceau had done everything to ensure that Darcy could create the device she needed, but now she needed to warn the theater troupe about it. Marceau thought that she definitely wouldn't be able to edit footage, so she wouldn't be able to make films, but she could definitely make plays and operas. Marceau thought that she could easily buy the entire troupe for herself, but people would probably start gossiping about it, and the girl did not want that. In any case, Marceau needed to talk to the actors, so she called Letty. Marceau asked Letty to gather the opera troupe and all its staff together in the garden. Letty agreed to do this without enthusiasm. The girl did not understand why Marceau needed this, but preferred not to argue. Marceau thought she might commission a script so that the production would resemble a drama. The reflections were interrupted by the unpleasant news that Lejeune had decided to write a letter to Marceau. Lejeune wanted to come visit Marceau and was worried that they had not seen each other for a long time. Marceau tiredly ran her hand over her face. Lejeune never thought about what rumors might start about Marceau. Marceau thought that she and Lejeune had never been close enough for her to invite the girl over. The problem was that Marceau didn't want to see Lejeune. Lejeune was good and kind, but whenever they met, those around her, and even the main characters of this story, began to accuse Marceau of all sins. Marceau always remained in Lejeune's shadow and constantly asked herself what she had done wrong this time, why this time she would be subjected to public censure. Before, Marceau thought there was something wrong with her, but now that she had given in, she felt truly free. However, it was still worth meeting with Lejeune to settle things properly once and for all. Marceau did not want to meet with her alone, so she decided to invite Ryan and Kaiser. Thoughts about Lejeune and her inattention upset Marceau, but she was about to meet Darcy, so she managed to forget about it at least for a little while. Darcy showed up right on time. Marceau was waiting for him with the check and cakes ready. Darcy's expression seemed irritated for a moment. Darcy sat down on the sofa, and Marceau mentally asked herself why the man could suddenly be so angry. However, the next second, a familiar smile blossomed on Darcy's face, while Marceau thought that for a moment the man seemed frightening to her. Marceau said that 2 weeks had passed since their last meeting and asked how their joint project was going. Darcy said that he had a question in return and asked why Marceau needed all this at all, because he had the feeling that the girl was planning to never leave her house again. Marceau replied that Darcy had understood everything correctly. She was not going to leave the house anymore. Marceau thought that in any case, rumors about this should soon begin to spread, and Darcy was surprised to ask why the girl had made such a decision. Marceau looked at Darcy very carefully. She didn't know how to tell him about the reasons. Because she didn't trust the man too much yet, the merchant spread rumors too easily. Marceau tried to avoid the topic by saying that every family has its problems, and hers was no exception. Marceau said that ultimately she is just following her father's will. Marceau tried to say something else, but was met with a rather cold look from Darcy. Darcy seemed to be petrified. The man did not react at all to what Marceau was saying. Marceau felt as if Darcy was waiting for her to tell him the truth. Sighing, Marceau decided that it was okay to open up to Darcy at least a little and said that she was simply too tired of people. This sounded surprising to Darcy, who was tired of being locked in the castle. Darcy wanted to simply leave the country over time instead of taking revenge on his offenders, but Marceau gradually changed something in him. Marceau said that she planned to just rot in her room forever and thought that would be the happiest thing. Darcy asked irritably if the girl even understood what it meant to be locked up. Marceau looked at Darcy with confusion. She was surprised by the man's reaction. However, the girl replied that she understood perfectly well what it meant to be locked up. Marceau didn't plan on getting hung up on it and asked what was up with the device Darcy was supposed to make. Darcy thought that at first it seemed to him that Marceau simply had too specific taste, but the girl's oddities were clearly not explained by this. The silence dragged on. Marceau suggested that she had given Darcy too little time. The man assured her that this was not the problem and offered to change the contract. He wanted to know more about how Marceau imagined isolation for herself. Marceau was surprised that Darcy was interested in her plans, and the man explained that he himself had spent a long time in isolation. After this, Darcy said that he had finished with everything that Marceau had previously asked for. Darcy said he was doing quite well at his job and asked Marceau to give him a hand. Marceau extended her hand to Darcy. The man placed in her hand the device that Marceau had been waiting for. It resembled the cameras of the modern world. Darcy leaned too close to Marceau. The girl felt awkward, but thought that she would very much like to continue working with this man. Darcy smugly stated that Marceau would be hard-pressed to find someone as experienced as he was. It was for this reason that Marceau agreed to show Darcy exactly how she planned to spend her time alone. Darcy and Marceau walked along the corridors of the estate. Darcy thought gloomily that very soon he would leave the palace and the emperor who was using him. Darcy thought that if he had claimed the throne, perhaps he would have been loved like Ryan. But the man had no desire to waste his life on something like that. Darcy thought that if he managed to survive his birthday, he would finally be free and could go somewhere far, far away, live the way he wanted, and repent of the sins he had committed. But until that moment, he could easily while away the time by studying the girl who wanted the opposite. Marceau led Darcy into a half-empty room, which she called the theater room. Marceau said sheepishly that while there was nothing special about the room, Darcy noted that the room looked empty. Darcy sincerely did not understand why Marceau brought him here, but the girl placed the enchanted device on the table and turned it on. On the wall opposite, a blank screen appeared, reminiscent of projectors from the modern world. Marceau was delighted that Darcy had actually managed to do what she had asked for, and the man replied that it was as easy as pie. Darcy wondered what exactly Marceau was planning to do in this room alone. Marceau replied that she usually lay on her bed and listened to music, but now she planned to record plays with an enchanted device and watch them in this room, and she also usually read books and ate here. This sounded like nonsense to Darcy. The man could not believe that this was all that Marceau wanted. Darcy asked why she didn't just go outside for a walk, and Marceau replied that she liked being alone. Darcy's gaze was still distrustful, so Marceau asked him to lie down on the sofa and then went to the window. Darcy thought that whatever Marceau had planned couldn't change anything, because he knew what it was like to be alone, and it made him sick. Marceau said her favorite time of day was from midnight to dawn. After this, Marceau closed the thick curtains, plunging the room into semi-darkness. Then Marceau quietly walked up to the gramophone and turned it on, and music could be heard in the room. After a couple of minutes, Darcy closed his eyes, thinking about how suddenly he felt very calm. Marceau, having managed to lie down on the bed, said that now they just needed to lie on the bed and listen to music. Darcy, sitting on the couch, indignantly asked if this was really all that Marceau wanted. Darcy ran his hand over his neck in confusion and said that this wasn't quite what he expected. Marceau was silent for a while, and Darcy had time to think that the girl had fallen asleep. But Marceau soon responded that sometimes she just wanted to be alone. Marceau opened her eyes and said that sometimes she gives herself a break when she feels too exhausted. Darcy looked at Marceau with a slight smile. He could partly understand her feelings. Darcy asked why Marceau was so tired. Since she grew up in a wealthy family, Marceau replied that she was still human anyway. Marceau explained that her relationships with people had never worked out the way she wanted them to, so she simply needed to take a break from it from time to time. Darcy said that Marceau was getting tired because she was thinking too much about what other people thought of her, and she just needed to stop doing that. Marceau smiled awkwardly and replied that from now on she would try to correct this. Darcy asked what item Marceau would like to receive from him next time. The girl replied that she needed a magnifier so that the screen could take up the entire wall. Marceau enthusiastically said she wanted the entire wall to become a screen. Darcy noted for himself that Marceau's facial expression changed dramatically and became more lively. Darcy said that in that case they should meet in 2 weeks and left, the man thinking that he wanted to watch Marceau as long as possible. But it wasn't only pleasant meetings that were planned at Marceau's, which is why the girl's mood suddenly plummeted. Those who made her decide to become a recluse were about to appear in her house. Soon, Le Huan's joyful voice was indeed heard, and the girl herself appeared in the line of sight, with Ryan and Kaiser walking next to her. Le Juan said happily that it took them some time to get to Marceau's house. Marceau smiled tightly and thanked the three for coming, thinking that it was time to finally put an end to her terrible relationship with Lejuan. Marceau tried to be friendly, so she invited the three into the living room, even poured tea for everyone. Lejuan chirped about how she was very worried about Marceau not leaving the house. Marceau tried to answer neutrally that she was just a little sick, but Lejuan immediately became scared for the girl, and Ryan and Kaiser pierced Marceau with very displeased looks. Marceau looked at Lejuan with some regret. She understood that in some sense she had to hurt this girl. Marceau thought that Lejuan was sincerely worried about her. She was kind-hearted and could find a common language with everyone. It was for this reason that Marceau would like to believe that they would be able to become friends. Lejuan also wanted this. But Marceau put her cup on the table and said that she had asked everyone to come only to inform them that she would no longer be seeing Lejuan. Lejuan asked in frustration what had happened. Marceau replied that she had realized that being around Lejuan the way she was wrong, so now she was left to sit locked up and reflect on her mistakes. Lejuan asked what exactly Marceau thought she had done wrong, and then hastened to assure the girl that she was innocent. Marceau looked gloomily at Ryan and Kaiser and thought that nothing had changed. Marceau was even curious whether Lejuan really just didn't notice how Marceau was being pressured because of her. Marceau thought that Lejuan was not just avoiding any negative discussions herself. Lejuan, who was always covered by Ryan and Kaiser, never had to intervene in conflict resolution. Marceau thought that such behavior was not a crime, but it was always Marceau who was under attack, so it was worth ending it all, after which Marceau asked Lejuan not to call her by her informal name anymore. Kaiser was immediately indignant because it seemed to him that Marceau was giving orders to Lejuan. Marceau answered very calmly that she had no intention of ordering anyone to do anything. She was simply outlining her boundaries. Marceau said that no one would see her at any event again, nor next to Lejuan. Kaiser did not believe her. Marceau noted that, unlike Kaiser, Ryan sat even too quietly. Kaiser was soon distracted by Lejuan, who ran out of the room with tears in her eyes, throwing a final accusation at Marceau that she thought they were friends. Marceau thought that not only Kaiser should have run after Lejuan, but Ryan silently stared at the girl and was in no hurry to catch up with anyone. After a few moments of silence, Ryan confidently stated that people don't change that easily. Marceau said serenely that she had already promised to stay home when Ryan told her she wasn't allowed to do anything anyway. Marceau thought that most of Lejuan's difficulties should have been Marceau's fault, if the plot was to be followed. If we distort the plot, then Ryan had more time to spend with Lejuan. Now everything depended on the man and on whether he could avoid conflict with his beloved despite his difficult character. Marceau smiled and said that she really hoped that Ryan was suffering as much as she was, after which she chose to leave the prince. The most difficult and unpleasant part was over. Now Marceau was preparing to meet with the actors. Letty, who was helping Marceau get ready, said the girl looked stunning. Marceau stood up and casually told Letty that she suspected there was a spy in the house. Marceau said that Ryan was reacting too quickly to her actions and asked Letty to deal with it. The maid agreed. After this, Marceau headed to the theater room, where the troupe had already gathered. There was a hum of voices in the room, which died down as soon as the door opened. Marceau greeted everyone gathered and thanked them for coming. Marceau was met by a short man who introduced himself as Patol, the playwright of the troupe. Marceau said with a smile that she had heard a lot about Patola and was confident in his talent. After that, Marceau turned her gaze to the stage. The actors looked scared. Apparently, they had heard rumors about the girl, but since they had come, they should not have cared about it. Marceau thought that she was paying the actors 10 times the market rate, so they had nothing to complain about. But at that moment, she heard whispers that she might make the actors do something strange. Marceau decided to speak frankly, took out the enchanted device, and said that she had gathered everyone to announce that she was going to record the plays. The actors didn't understand what exactly Marceau had in mind, so they became even more tense. Ledro, the troupe's leading actor, ventured to ask Marceau what exactly she intended to do with them. Ledro was handsome, he played the leading role in the play, and was also the most popular actor among the young ladies. However, Marceau's heart belonged to Darcy's flawless appearance. Marceau said it would be easier if she just showed what exactly she planned to do. Ledro stood in front of the device, looking at the lens with confusion and not quite understanding what was required of him. Marceau explained that Ledreau might try to say something, and several other actors followed suit. Marceau smiled as she prepared the device for display, and behind her there were whispers of interest. The device was turned on, and what the actors saw stunned them. They saw what had just happened and could look at themselves from the outside. Marceau explained that she had invented the device herself and could vouch for its safety, but if anyone doubted the enchanted devices, then they doubted the girl too. Marceau had to explain this since enchanted devices were still feared, but this clearly no longer applied to the actors. The actors were very active in discussing what they saw on the screen. They were not afraid that they were recorded by some strange device. Marceau asked with a smile if everyone agreed to continue recording. There were no refusals, and the atmosphere in the theater room immediately warmed up. Pétole ran up to Marceau and said that he would like to ask the girl a question before they began the play. The problem was that the play the actors were supposed to perform was about the love between a girl and a magician. Pétole was not sure that they could show this play to Marceau because the aristocrats had a specific attitude towards magicians. The magicians were talented, but in their pursuit of power, their greed led them to cross the path of the imperial family. As a result, the magicians began to be oppressed. Some of them had to serve the emperor, others had to hide. Marceau knew that the rebellions of the mages had been suppressed many times, even leading to a large-scale battle. This battle was won by Ryan, who, of course, was good with a sword, but could not have coped without the enchanted items that were made for him by those magicians who served the emperor. Marceau found this ironic. Pétole asked Marceau if he should change the script, since such characters could cause moral trauma to the lady. Marceau replied that she had no problems with the mages, so Pétole could not change anything. After this, Marceau handed Pétole a large folder, explaining that it contained her ideas for future plays that the playwright should use. The play began. Marceau carefully followed the love story of a magician and an ordinary girl. A story of love and betrayal played out on stage, and the actors put their souls into what they did. Marceau was fascinated by the picture that was being played out so actively before her. When the play ended, Marceau gave a standing ovation with tears in her eyes. Marceau was delighted to have recorded the piece when Ledreau approached her. Ledreau asked if Marceau could allow the actors to watch a recording of the play. Marceau didn't mind, but she was curious why the actors needed it. Ledreau explained that they believe this is a good opportunity to look at their game from the outside and draw conclusions. The actors actually discussed technical aspects of their performance while watching the play. Marceau thought that this was the best way to convince people that enchanted devices were not evil. After watching the play, Pétole asked if they could watch the next play later. The man understood that the device was very expensive, but hoped that Marceau would meet them halfway. Marceau thought that enchanted items were indeed terribly expensive, so she understood why Pétole had so timidly asked for a simple favor. Marceau thought that she had no obligation to help the actors or anyone else. Marceau had often tried to help people before, but in gratitude she was met only with contempt. However, this was not the actors' fault. So after a few moments of thought, Marceau replied that the actors could watch the recordings whenever they wished. Moreover, Marceau gave the actors the device, saying that she could make another one, and when they offered to pay her, the girl asked them to repay her with good acting. Marceau had high hopes that this theater troupe would flourish, because they really put their heart and soul into what they did. Ledreau looked at Marceau in fascination. At one point the man even blushed in embarrassment. Ledreau knelt before Marceau, asking how he could repay the girl for what she had done for them. Marceau was at a loss, the girl thought that. As expected, Ledreau's performance was indeed magnificent. Marceau responded that Ledreau's performance was beyond praise. The transmission of emotions was free, so all that was required of Ledreau was to continue to work well. Ledreau kissed Marceau's hand, saying that he really hoped that the girl would visit them often, and then left, leaving Marceau at a loss. In a pub, sitting with friends, Ledreau talked about how the rumors about Marceau were absolute nonsense. Ledreau was asked why he had agreed to go to Marceau in the first place, and the man explained that after he had rejected the noblewoman's offer to become her lover, his affairs on stage were not going very well. Ledreau said that he was usually disgusted by aristocratic women because they wanted to possess leading actors as toys, but Marceau was different. Ledreau explained that Marceau was the first noble lady who noticed not the appearance, but the game. Ledro said that Marceau looked at him without any lust or greed in her eyes. Ledro's friend chuckled and said it sounded like Ledro would like to be Marceau's lover. Ledro seriously thought about this topic. Marceau admired the man. Thoughts about her did not want to leave his head. Another friend recalled that there were rumors that actors were leaving Marceau's house with improved skills. A friend asked Ledro if there had been any special preparation for him at Marceau's house, but the man remained silent. Ledro couldn't answer that question. All the actors had signed a non-disclosure agreement about the recording device. So far, everything was going well for Marceau. She managed to record 3 plays, and the writing of a new script was also moving forward confidently. Marceau was glad that she had more and more reasons not to leave the house. Marceau, with Letty standing next to her, asked the girl if she had managed to find out anything about the spy from Ryan in the house. Letty hesitated, but replied that she had received some information, and then handed Marceau an envelope from Ledro. Marceau looked at the envelope in confusion, while Letty hurried away. Marceau wondered what exactly Ledro might have written to her rather than said in person. Marceau didn't have time to open the envelope when Darcy appeared right in front of her. Marceau noted with a smile that Darcy was on time as always, and the man replied that he really appreciated punctuality. After this, Darcy asked with a smile what kind of envelope Marceau was trying to hide in her hands. Marceau was embarrassed and replied that it was just a letter from one of the actors, after which she warned Darcy that she had lent the actors a recording device. Marceau said with a smile that everyone called Darcy's invention wonderful. Darcy muttered that it wasn't very good, because he would get into trouble if anyone found out about his abilities. Marceau did not hear what Darcy muttered and asked what he was talking about, but Darcy chose not to pursue the subject. After this, Darcy handed Marceau a new device that was supposed to enlarge the screen. Marceau looked at Darcy in fascination and could not understand why there was nothing about him in the original plot of the book. Marceau felt that Darcy had to be connected in some way to the main characters. The only suggestion Marceau had was that Darcy might have died before the events of the book began. Marceau was frightened by such thoughts and hastened to convince herself that Darcy was just a merchant, and that was why there was no mention of him. Marceau said that she would like to order another recording device and give the previous one to the actors. At this moment, Darcy gave off a chill. The man asked why she needed it. Darcy said that Marceau should take care of herself first. Marceau responded that the choice to help the actors or not was her own. Darcy said he just wanted to keep Marceau from doing anything stupid and getting hurt. Marceau blushed. Such words from a man came as a surprise to her. Marceau replied that she would be fine, especially since she did not expect anything from the actors in return. Darcy took Marceau by the hand and said that although she says she expects nothing from the actors to be replaced, there are rumors that she has accepted Ledro as her lover. Marceau asked, stunned, why she needed this, and Darcy replied that he certainly didn't know. Marceau explained that she hardly even sees the actors because she arrives at the very end of the rehearsal. Darcy smiled contentedly and said that he had been misled. Marceau confirmed that it was just a misunderstanding, but the girl was surprised to herself that she had blushed for some reason. Darcy looked at Marceau with a silent smile. He still really enjoyed watching the girl's reaction. Darcy asked if Marceau needed any other devices while he was ready to deal with them, because soon he would not be able to come to the girl for some time. Marceau asked if it was because Darcy's business was booming, and the man replied that it was something like that. Marceau said that for her next project, she wants a device that could capture the current moment. Darcy immediately understood what exactly Marceau was talking about. The girl thought that she was ready to fill this man with arcanium stones. Darcy asked if Marceau was interested in when exactly he planned to return. Marceau obediently asked Darcy about this, but received in response that he did not know anything for sure. Marceau was a little confused because she did not understand why Darcy asked him to ask about the time of his return, while the man meanwhile suggested that Marceau go to her theater room together. To Marceau's bewilderment, Darcy explained that he wanted to watch the play with her. Once in the room, Darcy explained that he needed to check if the recording device was working properly. As Marceau turned on the device, she thought that she would not see Darcy for some time. She knew little about him, but Darcy did not look like an ordinary merchant. Marceau was curious about Darcy's reluctance to be seen. Marceau suggested that it might be because Darcy was a mage. Marceau thought that it shouldn't bother her, since she had promised herself not to interfere in other people's lives. Looking at Darcy, who was reading a book, Marceau thought that she just wanted peace. Darcy turned towards Marceau. The girl blushed because of his sudden look. Darcy asked Marceau if she liked the women's novels he had found in her library. Darcy remarked that it was strange, considering that Marceau was sick of people. The girl said that she felt better because of the stories where people turned from strangers into those who cannot live without each other. Darcy supposed that in that case the girl must have a very vivid imagination. Marceau asked why Darcy's tone had suddenly become harsher, and the man replied that that was what made him so charming. Marceau sat down on the sofa and asked Darcy if he had ever loved. Darcy's gaze froze for a moment, indicating that Marceau had entered dangerous territory, before replying that he had never had the opportunity. Marceau asked where Darcy lived, since there would definitely be a crowd of female fans hanging around him. The man replied that he simply didn't like being around people. Darcy said that, formally speaking, he was very similar to an ordinary slave. Darcy said that he spent most of his time in his room, very rarely going outside, after which he came almost right up to Marceau and stated that he was rude to the girl sometimes because she reminded him of his own life. Darcy said that was exactly how his life was, but everything was fine. Darcy said that he could let it all go now, and Marceau realized that Darcy was about to leave. Darcy did not tell Marceau about this, seeing no need for it. Marceau thought sadly that, in all likelihood, the next meeting with Darcy would be her last. Darcy noticed that Marceau was lost in her thoughts and suggested that they watch a play together. Marceau watched the play, spellbound, even if it was for the second time, glad that the screen was now huge. Marceau wondered if Darcy liked this play and if he was bored. Darcy caught Marceau's attentive gaze and asked her what had happened. Marceau replied that Darcy seemed unusually focused. The man said that spells were as difficult as sword fights, while Darcy himself preferred fast-paced battles. Marceau said it sounded like Darcy had a lot of battle experience. Marceau thought that it was quite possible that she would see Darcy for the last time, because he would have to take part in some kind of battle. Marceau thought that she urgently needed to come up with something to protect Darcy, and the idea of a gun came to mind. Marceau quickly drew a sketch and asked Darcy if he could create something similar. When it was time for Darcy to leave, he said that the play was not bad, and the idea of the new device was very interesting. Darcy said that the new device reminded him of a portable cannon, and then advised Marceau to read the letter that Ledreau had given her. Marceau had already forgotten about this letter, but Darcy said that he had a premonition about this letter, so the girl should read it out loud in front of him. Darcy said that if Marceau read the letter in his presence, he would make a recording device for free, but the girl said that she had enough money. Darcy said a little gloomily that he had only just realized that the letter had been sent personally by Marceau. Marceau said that Darcy shouldn't say that because some people might think that he was jealous because he liked Marceau. Darcy said he was sorry that Marceau took it that way, and the girl replied that she was talking about other people. Darcy wondered thoughtfully if this was what Marceau herself wanted. Marceau was stunned, but Darcy continued and said that he knew that he was the girl's type. Marceau asked why Darcy assumed this, and the man explained that the girl's gaze gave her away. Darcy came very close to Marceau and asked if she wanted him to be interested in her. The girl answered negatively. Marceau pushed Darcy aside. The man asked why she suddenly refused. The girl explained that she found it difficult to believe that Darcy was a one-woman man. Darcy said that it was hard for him to disagree with Marceau because love seemed to him a very unpleasant thing. The girl noted that Darcy had never loved before. The man explained that he could well draw conclusions based on observations of other people. Darcy said it was always the same thing, people hugging and holding hands at first. They kiss each other so much that they don't notice anything that's going on around them. Darcy said that if necessary he could do it, but he was not sure if it was true love. Afterwards, Darcy said thoughtfully that Marceau felt challenged by the refusal. Darcy pulled Marceau close to him and said that if he wanted something, he always got it. After which he asked if Marceau wanted him to love her. Marceau looked at Darcy with confusion. She wasn't sure if he was asking her about this seriously. Marceau knew that Darcy was going to disappear from her life soon, so she didn't want to get her hopes up about him. Marceau hesitated, not knowing what to answer, but Darcy suddenly told the girl to forget about it. Darcy said that Marceau didn't have to answer if she didn't want to, then waved his hand, said that they would meet in 2 weeks, and left. Marceau thought Darcy was an impossible man who always did as he pleased. Marceau's thoughts returned to the fact that she didn't understand why Darcy didn't appear in the original plot. Something about the original story seemed strange to Marceau. Emperor Kais was constantly involved in battle with the mages. He was admired for how he bravely went forward despite the danger. Ryan, however, joined the troops when serious troubles arose. Marceau thought that the timing of Ryan's battle with Emperor Kais was out of sync. Ryan didn't fight when the Emperor did, though it didn't seem like Ryan lacked the skills back then, and the Emperor wasn't the type to protect his son. It seemed more like they just avoided fighting together. Marceau knew it might not have anything to do with Darcy, but it could be a clue. Marceau sighed heavily and thought about how she had still managed to become attached to Darcy. Meanwhile, in the palace, Emperor Kais announced to Ryan that he was going to go on a magician hunt for 2 weeks. The Emperor ordered Ryan to look after the palace during this time. Ryan agreed, but thought that his father never let him in on the country's problems. The Emperor suddenly said that after this hunt, he plans to hand over Castle Siren to Ryan, and also hold a coronation ceremony in the near future. This news shocked Ryan, not even regarding the coronation, but regarding the Castle of Siren, which he was not allowed to enter. Castle Siren was where Emperor Kais imprisoned and tortured mages. Ryan didn't understand why his father would suddenly trust him with such a thing. Ryan thought that perhaps whatever Kais was doing in this castle had simply come to an end, but he did not speak of his thoughts, but thanked the Emperor for the trust he had placed in him. Emperor Kais inquired about the situation with the daughter of the Étoile family. He had heard rumors that the girl had locked herself in her estate. Kais said that the Marceau family owned 2 arcanium mines, which was why marriage to them was highly desirable for Ryan. Ryan tried to say that they already had enough arcanium, but the Emperor stated that they needed more, and also said that he was confident that Ryan would do whatever was necessary for the imperial family. Emperor Kais ordered Ryan to arrange an engagement with Marceau. Emperor Kais was a ruthless man but had a soft spot for his lover Knight Germain. He secretly brought the silver-haired woman after the Empress passed away. The palace was at peace and they were both happy until his love Knight Germain died. And then cruel punishments and senseless mass murders became more frequent, and the Emperor completely lost his mind. Ryan walked down the corridor and thought that he should not allow his engagement to Marceau under any circumstances. He had 2 options. He could either prove to the Emperor that marriage to Le Huan would be more beneficial, or convince the Emperor that Marceau had fatal flaws. Ryan had heard rumors that Marceau had a lover, and the man decided to study this information in more detail. Ryan chuckled and thought that he would have to use the spy he had sent to Marceau earlier for this. Ryan thought he would definitely take care of the villain standing between him and Le Huan. Marceau had no idea what Ryan was thinking about her. She was just enjoying the cake without a care in the world. One of the chefs presented her with his signature dish, tiramisu, and another chef could not contain his emotions and exclaimed that even he could not try this dish. Marceau smiled and gave the second cook a spoonful of tiramisu for him to try as well. Marceau thought that she was tired of worrying about what was going on around her, so she decided to just enjoy the present moment, no matter how fleeting that moment was. Marceau was thinking very seriously about which dessert to try next when Letty announced some very unpleasant news. Letty said that Le Huan had decided to come to visit Marceau, which did not please the girl at all. Marceau asked that Le Huan be sent out, but it was too late. Le Huan burst into the room where Marceau was resting and declared that she needed to talk to her. Marceau's mood suddenly deteriorated. She sincerely hoped never to see Le Huan again. Letty, noticing her mistress's mood, told Marceau that this meeting could be useful for her, but Marceau did not think so, because Le Huan burst into her room without warning in advance, violating all conceivable boundaries. Marceau's personal space simply evaporated. Le Huan said something about how she was very happy to see Marceau, that she was very guilty before her. Marceau sighed, smiled, and asked Le Huan to leave. Le Huan looked at Marceau pitifully and said that she really didn't want Marceau to hate her. Marceau suddenly realized why Le Huan had suddenly taken such measures. The girl was used to everyone liking her, and she had never caused hostility in anyone except Marceau. That was why it bothered Le Huan so much. It was like a small, annoying spot on a perfectly white dress. Marceau asked if she understood correctly that Le Huan wanted to make peace with her because their fight made Le Huan feel uncomfortable, which is why she decided to burst into Marceau's place and force her to make peace with her. Le Huan replied that she had never wanted anything like that. The girl said that she had been too careless, but from now on she planned to be more attentive to Marceau, so she hoped that they would be able to live as before, because they got along so well. These words sounded irritating to Marceau. The girl asked if Le Huan remembered what Marceau always told Ryan. Receiving no answer, Marceau asked if Le Huan remembered what Marceau had told Kaiser. Le Huan had no answer. The girl blushed and looked away. Marceau said it wasn't that Le Huan had done anything wrong, but their views on friendship were too different, so they needed to end it. Marceau considered the conversation over and stood up to leave the greenhouse. Le Huan grabbed Marceau's hand and asked desperately what would happen if she tried to change. Le Huan asked if that would change her relationship with Marceau. Marceau turned to Le Huan in surprise. There were tears in the girl's eyes. The decision was difficult to make, but Marceau pulled her hand away from Le Huan and replied that she had already waited too long. Marceau thanked Le Huan for the pleasant memories and hurried to leave the girl, thinking that she was tired of comforting herself with hopes that everything would be different this time. There was no point in returning to the one who caused pain. Marceau lay on her bed and thought about how tired she was of the people around her. Marceau wondered if she might feel better if she cried the way Le Huan always did. There was a strange sound. Marceau thought it was Letty, but no one responded. Marceau had to go and open the door to check for herself, who had brought it to her home again. Marceau was ready to throw out another guest from the doorway, but she saw that Ledreau had come to see her. This man did not irritate Marceau that much. For this reason, Marceau let Ledreau inside to find out why he suddenly decided to come. Marceau, who was not in the mood to talk to anyone, asked what exactly brought Ledreau to her. The man said that he had something for the girl. It turned out that the entire troupe had decided to prepare a gift for Marceau to express their appreciation for what the girl had done for them. Marceau was flattered by this. She did not expect that the actors would decide to give her a gift. Marceau took the scarf out of the box, hugged it, and thanked her for the gift, saying that she hadn't done that much. Ledreau suddenly touched Marceau's cheek and asked if she was okay. Marceau's positive emotions were erased by this sudden gesture. Marceau recoiled from Ledreau and replied that she was perfectly fine and that he could leave. Ledreau caught Marceau's hand and said that she could always turn to him for help or tell him about her problems. Marceau felt a twinge of irritation. She was grateful that Ledreau had given her the gift, but his further behavior was unnecessary. Marceau repeated again that Ledreau could leave, and the man replied that he would like to stay with Marceau. Marceau recalled Darcy's words about the rumors that Ledreau was her lover. Ledreau, meanwhile, got down on one knee and said that he would not dare to allow himself to become Marceau's partner, but he would like to become her lover. Marceau didn't understand why Ledreau was suddenly behaving like this. She was sure that she hadn't given him a reason. Marceau panicked. She wasn't sure that Ledreau was not pretending. Marceau knew for sure that Ledreau simply could not have had time to fall in love with her. They didn't spend time together, they were never alone. Ledreau simply had no reason. Moreover, Marceau realized that in such conditions Ledreau definitely could not find out who she was, and therefore he fell in love not with her, but with the image he had created himself. This infuriated Marceau. Ledreau showed up at her place without warning, constantly trying to touch her against her will. He didn't care what the girl felt. Marceau sternly told Ledreau that she did not need lovers. She asked if the man understood how far he had crossed the line. The girl said that if Ledreau was interested in this kind of relationship and not acting, then he should not show himself to her anymore, since she found this disgusting. Fortunately, Ledreau quickly realized his mistake and rushed to apologize. Ledreau promised that he would focus on acting, but Marceau thought that if it weren't for Darcy's warning, she might not have responded with dignity. Marceau smiled as she sat on the couch. Finally, the day had come when she was supposed to see Darcy. Darcy, as usual, did not keep him waiting long, appearing right in front of Marceau. Darcy leaned over Marceau, and the girl, not feeling any discomfort near him, greeted him with a smile. The device that Marceau had asked for was ready, and it was quite similar to modern cameras. Marceau pushed a box of stones towards Darcy as payment, then said that he had been right. Marceau said a little sadly that Ledreau came to her with an offer to become her lover. Darcy jumped up from the couch and asked what exactly Marceau had answered Ledro. The girl replied that she had refused and was very grateful to Darcy since she was able to respond appropriately. Darcy noted with displeasure that Ledro did not strike him as a man who would easily back down from his intended goal. Marceau merely snorted and asked why this bothered Darcy so much in the first place. Darcy was taken aback and asked in surprise if Marceau really thought this bothered him. Darcy said it was not at all realistic, and Marceau noted that the man looked agitated. Darcy quickly changed the subject and suggested going to the theater to test a new feature he had invented for the recording device, which now allowed recordings to be transferred between two devices. Marceau said that in that case, she would now bring the recording device from the room with the theater. Darcy wanted to go with her. Marceau recalled that in this case, Darcy could have been seen by actors, which did not suit the man. Darcy asked Marceau to hurry up, as he did not want to be left alone. Marceau was surprised to note Darcy's changed behavior. The girl sighed and said that it did not suit the man at all. Darcy chuckled and noted with satisfaction that Marceau didn't fall for it. Soon, Marceau and Darcy were in the room. Marceau turned on the device, and just in case warned Darcy that this time the play would be a little different from the previous ones. Darcy noticed that Ledro was again playing the leading role and asked if Marceau could replace him. Marceau replied that Ledro had changed, so everything was okay. Darcy said that the girl was too kind. Marceau thought with bitterness that no one in this world had ever called her kind. The play that Marceau and Darcy watched was written by Patol based on Marceau's ideas. Marceau suggested a popular theme for Korean dramas about complicated family ties. Marceau liked it, but she asked Darcy if he was really interested in seeing this particular play. Darcy looked interested and replied that he was perfectly fine. The scenes that were played out in this play were close to Darcy himself. Darcy thoughtfully watched the tangled family connections and noticed that it was unusual for him to see it this way. Darcy noticed that the play ended just as Marceau's favorite time of day arrived. Darcy turned on the music. Marceau thanked him for it and suggested that she lie down too. Darcy grinned, agreed, and lay down next to Marceau on the bed, although the girl didn't quite mean it that way. Marceau said she meant that Darcy could lie down on the couch. The man said that they weren't even touching each other, so Marceau could just ignore him. Darcy was right, but Marceau suddenly realized that she was in the same bed with a man. Various strange thoughts crept into Marceau's head. Marceau assumed that it was because she had not yet slept at such a time. The girl asked Darcy to close her eyes. Darcy did not argue with Marceau and immediately fulfilled her request, closing his eyes. Marceau said thoughtfully that she and Darcy didn't need to talk, didn't need to do anything, they just needed to exist. Marceau thought, as she closed her eyes and sank into half-sleep, that she felt at ease with Darcy. Even though she had promised herself never to find comfort in anyone else's company again, it might mean that one day she would finally be able to stand on her own 2 feet and face the truth. After a while, Darcy announced that it was time for him to leave. Marceau watched Darcy go, realizing that they might never see each other again. Marceau looked at the camera in her hands, a great idea popping into her head. Marceau suggested that Darcy take a photo before he left so that she could keep it as a keepsake. Darcy didn't resist, but all the photos Marceau took of him came out blurry. Marceau looked at the photographs with sadness. She planned to remake them. Marceau suddenly confessed to Darcy that she knew she was seeing him for the last time that day. Darcy wanted to convince Marceau otherwise, but changed his mind and did not answer the girl. Marceau smiled and asked Darcy to try to stand still this time. Marceau placed the camera on the table and then ran over to Darcy and stood next to him. In the joint photo, Darcy looked like an offended child, which caused a chuckle to escape Marceau's lips. Marceau handed Darcy a photo and said she hoped the time they spent together would be a fond memory for him. Darcy wondered if these memories were supposed to fit into one small photograph, after which Darcy blushed, hesitated, and eventually thanked Marceau. Marceau laughed at Darcy's sudden shyness and confusion. Marceau thought that whatever Darcy's story was, he was still a good friend to her, and she hoped that one day Darcy would be able to escape from the room he was locked in and free himself from the shackles that held him. Marceau gently told Darcy that she wished him all the best for the future. Darcy asked if Marceau could do anything else for him and hugged the girl tightly when she agreed. Marceau hugged Darcy back in surprise, wondering if this was what the man was talking about. Darcy was in no hurry to let go of Marceau. He gently noted that the girl was very warm. Darcy asked if Marceau knew it had been forever since he had hugged anyone. Marceau thought bitterly that she really wanted to thank Darcy for everything he had done for her. She really didn't want him to go. Marceau thought that she had no right to keep Darcy close to her, plus it was she who wanted to keep him at a distance. Darcy pulled away and squeezed the girl's cheeks with his hand. Marceau asked what he was doing. The man replied that he was pleased to see that the girl was so serious because of thoughts about him. Darcy approached Marceau and said that he would also be interested to see how he would feel if the girl smiled because of him. Marceau laughed and said that Darcy was strange, but the man noticed that the girl smiled. There was a silence between Marceau and Darcy, but it retained the comfort that had been between them before. Marceau looked back at Darcy and smiled widely, letting the man remember her smile. Darcy smiled back, realizing that now was definitely the time to say goodbye. But Marceau was the first to say goodbye, and Darcy could only leave silently, unable to find the right words. Only later, when he no longer saw Marceau, Darcy wished her to take care of herself. Darcy remembered his childhood. Knight Germain, his mother, told him to obey the Emperor's orders until he became an adult. Otherwise, his heart would break because of the curse the woman put on her own son. Among the various abilities that mages possessed, Darcy's mother had mind control, and Darcy inherited this power from her. This rare and powerful ability made Kais unapproachable to magicians. But it was what he craved as a ruler, and so Knight Germain cast a curse on her son. The woman was ready to do anything for the love of the Emperor, but soon she died, and her son was left alone in this world, alone with his father. Fortunately for the Emperor, Darcy was not concerned with revenge. He only wanted to break the shackles of his parents' perverted love that kept him in captivity as soon as possible. And he really did plan to just disappear, but something stopped Darcy. Darcy found himself an unwitting witness to a conversation between Marceau and the Marquise of Etoile. The girl's father insisted on the need for Marceau and Ryan to marry. The girl was categorically against it, but the Marquis did not listen to her. Darcy was hurt by the fact that Ryan was going to become crown prince, but it hurt even more that he was going to marry Marceau. While Darcy suffered on the battlefield, Ryan studied the theory of monarchy and practiced the art of swordsmanship. Darcy was sure that Marceau was too good to become Ryan's wife, but if Kais had decided something, then Ryan's wishes did not matter at all, and Marceau's father was clearly not an assistant in this. Darcy didn't understand why he was even thinking about it, since it didn't concern him, but the thought of Marceau marrying Ryan made Darcy feel sick. Darcy decided it was because Marceau became his first friend. Darcy thought that he shouldn't have let this happen, that he should have left this place long ago, but now he realized that he simply couldn't leave. Darcy knew that Marceau was pretending to be okay, but inside she was vulnerable and in pain. He just couldn't turn a blind eye to it. Darcy decided that he would do everything in his power to ensure that Marceau did not suffer anymore. Darcy thought that in order for things to go the way Marceau wanted, he needed more power. This meant that Darcy might have to break his promise to Knight Germain and harm the Emperor. Darcy teleported to his room in the abandoned castle. Darcy didn't need to check anything. He already knew that his father was in the room too. Darcy turned on the water, pretending to just take a bath, then dried his hair with a towel. From under a stack of towels, Darcy took out a pistol, mentally thanking Marceau, because he could not yet use magic against the Emperor, but he could use enchanted items. Having hidden the pistol in his pocket, Darcy nevertheless went out to the Emperor. Kais asked what exactly had delayed the man so long. Darcy replied with a soft smile that he was simply having a good time alone. Emperor Kais said it was the right choice before he died. Darcy looked around gloomily. It was ironic that he knew absolutely all the guards that Kais had brought to kill his son. The curse on Darcy was supposed to be lifted at 2 o'clock in the morning. The Emperor obviously arrived earlier, since after this time it would be very problematic to kill Darcy. The man had to play for time. Darcy asked the Emperor to give him a minute. Kais did not oppose his son's dying wish. Emperor Kais would go to battle the mages whenever the opportunity presented itself, all because he valued efficiency and gained the people's trust by being a ruthless knight, an invincible emperor who protected his country with his outstanding battle tactics. In order to become such an ideal emperor, it was quite convenient to use an illegitimate child to replace the emperor on the battlefield. Darcy understood that now he simply had no right to make a mistake, because just one wrong move and he could die. Darcy looked darkly at Kais. This man stained his son's hands with blood, forced him to kill his own kind. He simply could not be called a father. Darcy exhaled, abruptly raised his hands with a loaded pistol, pointing it at Kais, and then said that he proposed to negotiate first. The guards were confused, and Darcy fired a warning shot, hitting Kais in the palm of his hand. The Emperor sank to the floor, holding his injured arm, and screamed in horror. Darcy, taking advantage of the confusion, approached the Emperor and put a pistol to his head. Darcy said with a smile that he probably shouldn't tell the Emperor that if he said anything stupid, he would face all those magicians he had killed. The Emperor looked at Darcy with hatred. The guards did not know what to do. The guards were especially confused when Darcy asked if he should call Kai's dad. Darcy warned that if any of the guards moved, he would shoot, and then turned to the Cylon who was standing closest to him, saying that he had seen how powerful his weapon was. After this, Darcy called out each guard by name, ordering them to answer him if they did not want the Emperor to die. The guards hastened to answer, but the Emperor indignantly said that Darcy was talking nonsense, he would not be able to kill the Emperor. Darcy replied that, apparently, Kais did not understand at all what situation he found himself in, but that once it was forgivable for him. Darcy noted with displeasure that he still addressed the Emperor formally. He was always supposed to treat Kais with respect, and hated having to use formalities. Suddenly it occurred to Darcy whether Marceau liked such formalities. Darcy thought that he had not made a very good impression on Marceau at their first meeting. Now he wanted to fix it and look attractive in the eyes of the girl. Without taking his gun away from the Emperor's head, Darcy wondered if he needed to practice making the right impression. The Emperor glanced at his watch and noted that he still had half an hour before the curse on Darcy was lifted, which meant he had to obey Kais. Darcy laughed and crouched down in front of the Emperor, saying that it was all written on his face. The laughter stopped suddenly. Darcy told the Emperor very coldly that he could no longer kill him. The Emperor asked Darcy if he really believed that he would not kill him. When the Emperor wanted to give Darcy an order, he suddenly realized that he could not speak. Darcy asked almost sympathetically if the Emperor was able to give orders now. Darcy said with a grin that the curse had already been lifted, which was why the Emperor would no longer be able to kill him. Darcy wondered if the Emperor really relied on the clock in his room to keep track of time. Darcy explained that the clock was half an hour slow, so it was already more than 2 o'clock. Moreover, Darcy had managed to take control of not only the Emperor, but also all the guards with his power, because all he had to do was call a person by name and get an answer from him. The Emperor looked at his men in disbelief, realizing that his perfect plan had not worked. Darcy was not lying. The Emperor saw in the eyes of the guards that they were under a spell. The Emperor laughed, then asked if Darcy intended to use him as a puppet. Darcy smiled and replied that he had not planned this. He had originally said that he had come to negotiate. The Emperor simply needed to listen and understand him. The Emperor declared that the dirty blood in Darcy could not be changed, after which a pistol was put to his forehead, and Darcy made his first request that Kais should recognize him as a prince. Darcy demanded that this news be announced at an official event, not forgetting to clarify that Kais sent Darcy to battle in his place. The Emperor wanted to object, but Darcy explained to him clearly that either the Emperor cooperates voluntarily or turns into a puppet. Darcy also demanded that Ryan's coronation ceremony be postponed. Darcy smiled as he imagined the look on his brother's face when he was not the one to receive the crown. Kais was supposed to crown Darcy, and the man needed it now. This was the only way Darcy could protect Marceau from the Emperor and Ryan. Darcy said he had never believed the Emperor when he had recognized him as Crown Prince, but he needed the title now. Darcy thought that once he became Emperor, he would be able to make Marceau live the way she wanted. The Emperor said with displeasure that he would fulfill Darcy's requests, after which he demanded that the weapon be removed from his face. Darcy removed it, but not before firing a shot into the air, causing the Emperor to lose consciousness. Darcy thought that with the title of Emperor, he could help Marceau find happiness. At his next meeting with Marceau, Darcy planned to appear before her with the appropriate status. Darcy thought of Ledreau and thought that he would also need to take a close look at Marceau's theatrical troupe. Darcy was in no hurry to remove the spell from the guards, thinking that it was too dangerous to be in the palace without supporters now. Approaching one of the guards, Darcy recognized him as his old friend. It was always a pleasure to work as a team with Kaizen during battles. Darcy smiled. He had very quickly found a person who would be his supporter. Calling Kaizen by name, Darcy cancelled the spell. The man gradually came to his senses and recognized Darcy. And at this time, Marceau was trying to convince her father that she didn't even want to see the prince, let alone attend some feast. The Marquis de Étoile stated that Marceau should have understood that this was inevitable anyway, so the girl should simply prepare herself. The Marquis de l'Étoile said wearily that he had thought Marceau liked Ryan. Marceau thought with sadness that her father did not take her seriously at all. This father did not even realize that in front of him was no longer his daughter, but a completely different person. Since his wife died, the Marquis despised his daughter. He could not bear to see Marceau, who was so similar to his beloved, but he did not have the strength to abandon his daughter. He did not skimp on her financial support, which did not change the fact that he was a very selfish person. The Marquis de l'Étoile said that he very much hoped that Marceau understood the whole situation, and then hastened to leave. Marceau thought with pain that she had already managed to forget that there was no one in this world who was on her side. The girl just wanted to lock herself in her room, but they didn't even let her do that. Marceau lay on her bed and thought that she didn't remember any feast in the book, nor that Marceau had become the crown princess. Marceau wondered if it was her actions that had changed the plot so much. Thoughts were too troubling for Marceau, so, unable to sleep, the girl decided to take a walk around the estate. Letty noticed her and asked with concern what had happened. Marceau explained that she simply could not sleep. Letty looked thoughtful and lost, but Marceau would rather not notice it now. Letty suddenly apologized to Marceau, saying that she should not have let Le Rouen see Marceau. Letty admitted that it was hard for her to see Marceau like this, so she thought it would be better if she and Le Rouen made peace so that Marceau could start attending all the events again. Marceau frowned. After the incident with Le Rouen, she wondered if Letty also thought she was pathetic. Marceau decided to set the record straight and asked what all this meant to Letty. Marceau looked at Letty very coldly, which had never happened before. Letty replied that she felt that Marceau was going through a difficult time and that it could have a negative effect on the girl. Marceau sighed. She could well assume that Letty was worried, sympathetic, and therefore keeping an eye on her. But in the end, Letty's concern was just an attempt to fit Marceau into society, and Marceau was infuriated by this. Marceau said grimly that she would assume Letty was just looking out for her. After that, Marceau had already raised her voice and declared that she wouldn't let something like that happen again, so Letty should watch her damn words. Marceau tried to explain that moments that might seem pathetic to others were precious to her. Moments like when she was just lying alone on her bed, or watching recordings of plays, or spending time in the garden. Marceau said she just needed all that time to recover. Letty bowed before Marceau and apologized to her. The girl explained her words by saying that at the time it seemed to her the best option. Marceau understood Letty to some extent. Different people had different values. Letty knew nothing about Marceau, but Marceau didn't know the history of her maid either. For this reason, Marceau relented and asked Letty to simply not say anything like that again. Letty said she was simply impatient with the upcoming event. Marceau knew that Letty would need to prepare a lot for this event. Letty said that she could handle everything, and then asked where Marceau was heading in the middle of the night. Marceau replied that she just wanted to spend the night in the theater room. Letty smiled and said that in that case, she would bring tea and cakes into the room, which should help Marceau to get a good night's sleep. Marceau smiled. She still liked Letty, even though she sometimes made very questionable decisions. A change of scenery, tea and cakes could not help Marceau fall asleep. Marceau lay staring at the ceiling, her mind lazily racing with thoughts of what she should do next. Marceau had absolutely no understanding of the imperial family's intentions. Marceau thought that perhaps the idea of the wedding belonged to the emperor, and also that if anyone found out about her last conversation with Le Rouen, she would again be accused of cruelty, and that she really missed Darcy now, with whom she felt comfortable. Darcy never perceived Marceau as a villain. It was with him that she could calmly be herself. Marceau missed him very much. Time flew by unnoticed. Only the constantly expanding archive of plays helped Marceau while away the time. Marceau was also pleased that Ledreau made every effort to remain an actor and avoided meeting her like the plague. Finally, the day came when Marceau was supposed to meet Ryan. Marceau looked at the castle and thought that she hadn't gone out for a long time. Ryan was already sitting, waiting for Marceau to appear, the man making sure there was as much distance between them as possible. Marceau curtsied politely, taking her time to start a conversation with Ryan. Ryan understood her. He, too, was not in the mood for a heart-to-heart talk with Marceau. Ultimately, Ryan said he was glad that he and Marceau agreed on something. He admitted that he had no desire to marry Marceau because his heart was already set on Lejeune. Marceau was sure that this was the case, so she simply replied that she knew about it. Marceau said that, unfortunately, even their combined desire was not enough to resolve the situation. Suddenly, someone called Marceau by name and covered the girl's eyes. The stranger apologized for being gone for so long, then noted that it looked like he had arrived just in time. The man, whose voice Marceau recognized as Darcy's, advised her not to bother talking to Ryan, as it could harm her poor ears. Naturally, Darcy's behavior enraged Ryan, who did not understand who was in front of him, and the man demanded that Darcy introduce himself. Darcy, still holding his hands over Marceau's eyes, replied with a calm smile that he was Ryan's older brother. After this, Darcy finally opened Marceau's eyes and said that he had a life-and-death question for the girl. Darcy asked if Marceau would have liked it better if he had spoken to her formally. Darcy bowed to Marceau, then suggested that she needed to hear a formal introduction from him, after which she could decide which format of communication was closer to her. Marceau, confused, asked Darcy what he was doing there. Darcy replied that he just wanted to see a girl. Darcy smiled and said that Marceau's magnificent appearance took him by surprise. Marceau blushed furiously. Marceau thought that now was not a very appropriate time to be embarrassed in response, after which she bombarded Darcy with questions about why he suddenly became Ryan's brother, what he was doing here anyway, but Darcy asked her to first answer his question about the format of communication. Marceau replied that she had no preferences on this matter. Darcy asked if Marceau was irritated by his familiar manner of speech. The girl replied that such a manner suited Darcy very well. Casually and completely ignoring Ryan's fury, Darcy said with a smile that Marceau shouldn't get engaged to his brother. Darcy said he came back specifically to help Marceau live the life she dreamed of and to make Marceau the happiest man on earth. Darcy said that it was because Marceau saved him. The girl mentally wondered what that could even mean. The conversation was interrupted by Ryan, who was tired of being ignored. Ryan took out his sword and pointed it at Darcy. Darcy asked where Ryan had lost his manners, since he decided to interrupt someone else's conversation in such a way. Ryan replied that it was extremely rude of Darcy to act as if he wasn't there at all. Ryan stated that even mentioning that Darcy belonged to the imperial family was a grave crime. Darcy advised Marceau to remain in the hall and enjoy the meal, while he and Ryan sorted out the details elsewhere. Marceau was worried about Darcy, so she asked the men to stay and talk in her presence. Marceau didn't know what exactly was going on, but she felt like Darcy might be at a disadvantage if she was left alone with Ryan. Darcy smiled and said he liked the way Marceau had asked him to stay and asked if she could do it again. Leaning towards Marceau, Darcy whispered to her that she shouldn't worry about him. He planned to return soon and explain everything to the girl. Marceau looked at Darcy carefully and then said that she trusted him. Darcy smiled happily at Marceau, said that he really hoped that the girl would like the banquet. He did not know what the girl would like, so he prepared everything. The men left the hall, and in the meantime the table was set with various dishes. Marceau decided not to dwell on it and actually enjoy the food, which turned out to be truly delicious. Marceau noted that this was the first time she had eaten in peace at the palace, but she was still curious about how Darcy was doing. Darcy at this point led Ryan into one of the rooms with absolute confidence. Marceau saw some macaroni on the table and thought it would be a good idea to buy Letty a box of them. Letty, however, was not quite in the mood for sweets, as was Ryan, who looked with horror at what Darcy had decided to show him. Right in front of Ryan lay Letty tied up, Darcy smiling contentedly as he looked at her. Letty had a tight collar around her neck, and Darcy was holding her by it. Darcy said that Ryan's spy in Marceau's house turned out to be her own maid, and the man asked if Ryan was a scoundrel because of this. Letty apologized to Ryan in frustration and said that she didn't mean to get caught like that. Ryan crouched down in front of Letty, reassuring her that everything was okay. Darcy noted that the rumors about Ryan being kind to his subordinates were true. Ryan asked how Darcy was able to spot the spy. Darcy explained that he noticed that Ryan had started spreading bad rumors about Marceau to break off the engagement. Letty did all the dirty work, so she was easy to catch. Ryan was surprised to notice that Darcy seemed completely unarmed. But that feeling passed when Darcy put a gun to Ryan's head. Darcy said that Kais liked the weapon so much that he passed out. Ryan grimly asked who Darcy was anyway. Darcy replied that he was the inhabitant of Castle Siren, whom Kais had hidden for so long. Ryan asked in surprise if Darcy was really the one the Emperor was hiding. Darcy chuckled and said that Ryan was an extremely ungrateful person because Darcy had spared him as a child. Darcy called Ryan by name and said that this was the last time he would show mercy to his brother. Long-forgotten memories from his past childhood appeared in Ryan's head. Ryan remembered that he had seen Darcy once before, a long time ago, when he was still a naive child. Darcy's aura surprised Ryan at the time, as it was unlike anyone else's. Ryan demanded that Darcy play with him. Darcy sat down next to him, called him a brave boy, and then demanded that he forget everything he knew about the abandoned castle, because that was the only way he could continue to live. Ryan put his hand to his face. The fog in his head seemed to clear. The man assumed that Darcy had used mind control on him back then. This explained a lot to Ryan. He realized that the Emperor was hiding Darcy because of his power, but apparently Darcy was difficult to control, which is why the Emperor decided to get rid of Darcy. Ryan thought that the Emperor might have wanted to give the castle to him to destroy any possible evidence, but in that case it was strange that Darcy was alive. Thinking about the worst thing, about murder, Ryan asked what Darcy did to the Emperor. Darcy replied that he had spared the Emperor because he needed Kais to declare him crown prince. Ryan asked furiously how Darcy dared to use the devil's power to control the Emperor and mock him. Darcy replied that mind control was not the only method of influencing the Emperor, after which he fired towards Letty, the bullet grazing the girl's ear. Ryan immediately rushed to Letty, asking if she was okay. Letty, stuttering a little, replied that everything was fine. Darcy said that Ryan should be grateful that the man did not kill the spy. In Darcy's opinion, spying on someone else's life without permission, under the pretext of protecting the woman he loved, was an act that truly made Ryan look like the devil. Ryan responded that Marceau deserved it all, considering everything she had done. Darcy shot at the statue behind Ryan and said with a smile that if he wanted to live, he would immediately go out the door behind him. Darcy said with a broad smile that he wanted to enjoy the banquet with Marceau. Ryan decided that he really should retreat, especially since he needed to check Letty's ear, and went out into the hallway with the girl, immediately bumping into Marceau. Marceau said she wanted to check on Letty and asked in surprise what had happened to her ear. After this, Marceau noticed Ryan and asked why Letty was with him. It didn't take Marceau long to put two and two together and figure out who the spy was. Marceau asked if Letty had also collaborated with Ryan simply because she wanted the best for Marceau. After this, Marceau laughed hysterically, realizing that the maid she trusted had been a traitor from the very beginning. After a few moments, Marceau calmed down and said bitterly that apparently there really was no one on her side. Angered, Marceau asked Ryan if his hostility towards the Étoile family was purely for his own personal reasons. Ryan replied grimly that it was Marceau who first started expressing hostility. Marceau thought that in the past she would have tried to answer Ryan as politely as possible, even if it meant sacrificing her self-respect. But after everything that had happened, everyone could just go to hell. Marceau demanded that Ryan stop talking nonsense, since he was the one who crossed the line in the first place. Ryan was pleased to note that Marceau had finally shown her true colors, while the girl said that the man had finally lost his conscience in the name of love. Ryan didn't even try to justify himself, replying that he was ready to do anything for the sake of his love. Marceau chuckled, realizing that there was no point in talking to Ryan, and simply told the prince to go to hell. Marceau said that the party was over, she was in no mood to talk, and she couldn't leave Letty without medical attention. The girl added that she was no longer the girl who loved Ryan. Marceau said that this would never change again, and then headed for the exit. Ryan looked after the girl in confusion. Marceau added that Ryan should never have sought to meet her again. Marceau's days of trying her best for Ryan were long over. After this, Marceau left the castle, finally saying goodbye to Ryan. After this, Marceau was caught up by a worried Darcy, who asked if the girl's feelings were hurt. Marceau calmly replied that if this was the case, then Ryan would have been able to achieve what he wanted. Darcy ran his hand over Marceau's cheek, telling her that it would be okay if she was more sensitive around him. Darcy smiled and said that Marceau must have known that he could be trusted. Marceau thought it would be strange to trust Darcy, considering that it was Letty who had introduced her to him. But Marceau trusted Darcy. The girl came closer to the man. Darcy asked what happened. Marceau replied that nothing had happened. She just wanted to admire Darcy's beautiful face. Darcy sheepishly said that he thought it was his job to make bad jokes, and Marceau asked if Darcy was going to tell her what exactly had happened. It was decided to hold the conversation in the theater room. Darcy turned on the music and tried to collect his thoughts. Darcy said he had a lot to tell Marceau, but before that, he wanted to show her his true face. Darcy removed the lens, then turned to Marceau and showed her his multicolored eyes. Darcy asked if Marceau thought those eyes were cursed. Before everyone was afraid of them because of the color, the man asked Marceau to tell him if his eyes scared her too. Darcy said he didn't want Marceau to look into his eyes if she hated them. Marceau touched Darcy's cheek with her hand and said that his multicolored eyes suited him very well and that they also resembled the sunset sky and daylight. Darcy said he was afraid that Marceau would hate his eyes too. The girl said it was very stupid of him to think so. Darcy looked at Marceau with satisfaction, realizing that he was absolutely right in his choice. After that, Darcy relaxed and sat down on the couch and told Marceau that he and Ryan were brothers. They had different mothers, but the same father. No one knew that Darcy was a member of the imperial family, since, in fact, he simply did not exist in this world. Marceau looked at Darcy with regret. She had guessed something like that, but still it was hard to hear something like that from someone close to her. Darcy explained that he was actually a mage, not an artifact dealer. The Emperor once fell in love with a mage girl. That's how Darcy was born. Unfortunately for him, his abilities could be used for military purposes. The Emperor was faced with a dilemma. The hatred he felt for magicians clashed with the desire to use his son's abilities for his own interests. Darcy said that the Emperor locked him in an abandoned castle. He could only act on his father's orders. The rest of the time Darcy was left alone. He was as if dead. Darcy explained that the reason he was so eager to escape was because he knew the Emperor wanted to kill him. Marceau thought that perhaps in the original story the Emperor had been able to do this, and she also understood why Darcy had reacted so harshly when she said she wanted to lock herself in her house. Darcy said that in the end Marceau saved him, because thanks to her, he got the Arcanium stones and was able to create a gun. If it weren't for the meeting with Marceau, everything could have gone according to a completely different scenario. Darcy sincerely thanked Marceau for everything she had done for him, and the girl thought that she could help at least someone change. Darcy said that he was able to escape thanks to Marceau, but he decided to stay because of her, since he heard the news of her wedding with Ryan. Darcy said that he was afraid that Ryan would make Marceau unhappy. He couldn't allow this, because Marceau was the first person with whom he communicated and became close. Darcy said that was why he had decided to delay his departure. Marceau asked if that meant he would eventually leave anyway. Darcy replied that even with his status as a member of the imperial family, he would not want to live here. He did not think he deserved it, and there was nothing keeping him here. Darcy approached Marceau and gently took her face in his hands, looking into the girl's eyes. Darcy said that he wanted to see Marceau live happily, so he would like to stay with her. Darcy asked Marceau to let her help. He promised that for her sake he would get any title that was needed. Darcy smiled and said that for this reason, Marceau should go ahead and achieve her dreams. Ryan sat in his office in a deep state of thought about everything that had happened. Ryan recalled the last words Marceau had spoken to him before she left. Ryan couldn't figure out why Marceau kept popping up in his thoughts. Ryan expected Marceau to continue clinging to him like she had before, but she didn't. Ryan assumed that he had hurt Marceau too much. He thought that if Marceau was telling the truth, then he was the villain in this story because he had harassed an innocent man. The glimmer of conscience, however, quickly disappeared. Ryan hit the table and decided that Marceau was a villain who, apparently, did something strange to him. He was sure that the girl was plotting something. Ryan listened to his subordinate's report, thinking that he still had a lot of things to do, especially he needed to decide what to do with Darcy, because if he planned to encroach on his title, he had to be destroyed. Kaiser suddenly entered Ryan's office and bowed to Ryan. Ryan asked what exactly brought Kaiser to him. The man asked if Ryan had already met Darcy. Ryan asked how Kaiser knew the man, and the man replied that he believed Darcy was well suited to take the throne. Ryan gripped the tabletop fiercely and asked if Kaiser wanted to go against him, then said he could see right through the man. Ryan believed that Kaiser was simply jealous of him because Le Huan was with him. Kaiser said he knew what Ryan was thinking, but tried to reassure him that he truly had the good of the empire in mind. Ryan angrily asked if they were really talking about the same person, or if Kaiser was just jealous that Le Huan had chosen Ryan and left Kaiser out of her sight. Ryan remembered Le Huan running into his arms for comfort. Ryan then felt confident and triumphant because he had achieved his goal. Finally, Le Huan became his. Le Huan chose him Ryan among a great many other men. The mention of Le Huan made Kaiser furious. He couldn't understand how Ryan had thought to bring her into this conversation. Darcy intervened in the conversation at the right time, saying that Ryan had misunderstood everything. Kaiser simply knew that Darcy was much more competent than Ryan. After this, Darcy swung and hit his brother hard, who fell to the floor from the blow. Without giving Ryan a chance to come to his senses, Darcy grabbed him by the lapels and lifted him off the ground. Darcy asked very coldly if Ryan was really that slow, wondering why the hell Marceau had caught Ryan with Letty. Ryan realized with horror that in addition to mind control, Darcy could also teleport. Ryan spat out blood, told Darcy to go to hell and said he was leaving right away. Darcy said Ryan was too pathetic and didn't understand anything. Ryan wiped away the remaining blood and asked if Darcy had really claimed the throne. Darcy replied that for the sake of happiness, Marceau would prefer not to see Ryan on the throne. Ryan asked fiercely if that was Darcy's only reason, since the position of Crown Prince was noble and had deep meaning. It was meant for someone who could dedicate himself to the prosperity of the empire. Darcy pointed a gun at Ryan and said that his goal was much nobler than the phrase he learned from a textbook, after which he said that he was ready to do anything for Marceau. Kaiser stood behind and preferred not to interfere in the conversation, although he did not like the mention of Marceau. Darcy pushed Ryan away so that he fell to the floor again, unable to keep his balance. Darcy stated that in time people would find out who really contributed to the prosperity of the empire, and until then, the man advised Ryan to remain a good and obedient boy. In the hallway, Darcy said Kaiser looked like he wanted to say something. Kaiser said he had sworn allegiance to Darcy, but he found it difficult to understand his opinion of Marceau Etoile. Kaiser confidently said that Marceau was most likely deceiving Darcy. After that, Kaiser asked if Darcy loved Marceau. If he was sure that she was not deceiving him, Darcy remembered his mother. Because of childhood memories and because he had seen where Knight Germain's love had led, Darcy confidently answered that he did not love Marceau. Darcy truly believed that he absolutely could not feel love for Marceau because he was sure that this feeling could disfigure people. Darcy was sure that he just wanted Marceau to be happy, for her suffering to finally end. Darcy knew that this feeling could not be what his mother felt for the Emperor. It was something more beautiful than love. Kaiser was not prepared for the fact that Darcy, the man to whom he swore allegiance, had such feelings for Marceau, whom he considered a villain who was making insidious plans. Kaiser tried to convey this idea to Darcy again, but Darcy's reaction was clearly negative. Darcy chuckled and asked if Kaiser remembered the time Darcy asked him to collect all the negative rumors about Marceau. Without waiting for the knight's answer, Darcy said that he noticed from the reports that most of the rumors came from Ryan and Kaiser, who were very happy when they managed to punish Marceau once again. But the degree of punishment was always excessive. Even her childish jealousy was eventually called almost a mortal sin. Marceau apologized a year ago, after which all incidents looked more like accidents. So Darcy wondered if Kaiser was really so stupid as to be so judgmental of Marceau. Kaiser tried to explain that he considered it his duty as a decent man to warn Darcy about Marceau. Darcy didn't let Kaiser finish. He loomed over the man and asked if he really, like Ryan, planned to rub it in Darcy's head that Marceau was to blame for everything, that she deserved it all. Darcy promised that Kaiser would envy the dead if he dared to say any of that. Darcy then turned and walked forward, advising Kaiser not to use prejudice to justify his actions. Kaiser exhaled wearily. He was still not ready to feel sympathy for Marceau, but he also understood that it was useless and dangerous to say anything to Darcy about this. Meanwhile, Marceau lay on the bed, lost in her own thoughts. Even sweets couldn't save her from melancholy. Marceau recalled a conversation with Darcy when she tried to convince the man that everything was fine with her. Darcy then said that people, no matter what they are not created to live alone. Marceau then thought that she wanted to run away from this society, not only because of the emperor. Additionally, Marceau was frustrated that she ended up isolated and unable to interact with people. Darcy told Marceau that it was perfectly normal that she wanted to hide, because she was just finally giving herself a break from the exhausting situation. Darcy promised Marceau that from now on, everything would be different, because he would be there. Marceau smiled slightly and thought that it was very thoughtful of Darcy. Marceau rose from her bed and thought that Darcy was right about her simply not being able to run away all the time. Marceau decided to head to her office to take care of some business, but after eating a piece of cake, she realized that she couldn't remember what exactly she was going to do. Marceau thought that as soon as she came to this world, she really wanted to travel and study magic. Ultimately, Marceau was forced to make concessions and try to work things out. But these attempts always ended with the same Ryan throwing new accusations at Marceau. After which, he carefully hugged Le Guin and tried to take her as far away from Marceau as possible. For Le Guin, Ryan was willing to do anything, even if it was a very mean act. And it was Ryan that Marceau wanted to take revenge on now, so that he would at least once get what he deserved for always looking down on the girl. But Marceau didn't want her whole life to end up dedicated to revenge. Marceau's gaze fell on the photograph she had taken with Darcy. People might still be skeptical about magical items, but Marceau had seen with her own eyes how these items made people happy. Marceau thought that with photography she could capture a moment, and that was beautiful in its own way. Marceau thought that she could popularize magical items, but she would need the help of other magicians, because after the coronation, Darcy could become very busy. Marceau was curious about what other mages were like. She had heard that they were very proud and preferred to keep to themselves, but she didn't want to draw conclusions based on rumors. Marceau was glad she had the outline of a plan in her head when a new maid entered the room. The maid offered Marceau some tea, but the girl thought she had some more unfinished business and asked for Letty to come to her. Unfortunately for Marceau, she couldn't fire Letty right away, but she tried to gather as much information as possible about how Letty came to be in her house in the first place. Letty's recommendations were impeccable. None of the servants could suspect her of being a spy. Marceau blamed only Ryan, who needed his own man next to her. Letty returned to the estate a few days after her spying was exposed. Marceau met Letty at the door of the house, and Letty hastened to apologize to Marceau. But Letty was no longer the kind of person Marceau could call close, so the girl coldly said that she had not gone out into the street to listen to other people's apologies. Marceau understood perfectly well that Ryan was invisibly standing behind Letty. No matter what Marceau did not trust her with, any information would immediately be passed on to this man. Given this fact, Marceau told Letty that she was going to resume her social life and go out more often. Marceau explained that this was not at all what everyone expected from her, because Ryan now meant nothing to the girl. Letty, who was sure that Marceau was breaking his seclusion for Ryan's sake, asked what other reasons Marceau might have. Marceau replied with a smile and pride that she still had things to do. A couple of days later, Petol was ready to do anything for Marceau. The play, which Petalou helped Marceau write, was to be staged in theaters. Petol was very happy about this and immensely grateful to Marceau, which is why he took the risk of inviting Marceau to the production, even though he knew that the girl rarely left the estate. Marceau thought that the praise for this play was already spreading around, so she could very well start her promotion of magical items from the theater, simply by hinting that the play was staged using something special. Marceau was getting dressed for the theater when she thought that Petol had given her 2 tickets. The girl would very much like to invite Darcy to the theater, but was sure that the man was too busy. And what was Marceau's surprise when she saw Darcy opening the door of the estate? Marceau could not hide her delight when she looked at Darcy, who looked especially handsome that day. Darcy waited for Marceau near the carriage, brushing invisible specks of dust from his suit. Marceau ran up to Darcy, happily asking him what exactly he was doing near her house. Darcy smiled and said that he heard that a girl needed a partner for going to the theater. Already sitting in the carriage, Marceau asked how Darcy had learned about the trip to the theater. The man replied that Petol had boasted too loudly that the highly respected Marceau was to appear at his performance. Suddenly, Marceau felt that Darcy's mood had dropped sharply, and she hastened to inquire what had happened. Darcy asked very gloomily why Marceau herself had not invited him to the theater. Marceau explained that she thought Darcy was too busy. The man explained that the official ceremony was not until next week, so he was completely free for the girl. Marceau noted that she had not told anyone that she was going anywhere, and Darcy replied that he had not known that either. After which, Darcy smiled and said that in any case he just really wanted to see Marceau. Marceau blushed, turning away from Darcy, and said that the man had a talent for saying embarrassing things. When the carriage pulled up to the theater, Darcy hurried to open the door for Marceau and helped her down to the ground. Darcy practically hugged Marceau, which made the girl blush desperately again, and the girl's heart skipped a beat. The appearance of Darcy and Marceau at the palace caused a stir. Everyone was interested in seeing the prince who had suddenly appeared. Marceau glanced quickly at Darcy to make sure he was okay, as Darcy had said it was his first time attending such an event. Darcy looked relaxed, despite being the center of attention, but seemed unusually unattainable. Marceau darkened a little, which did not escape Darcy's attention, but he did not have time to ask a question. Marceau noticed Petol, who hurried to run up to the girl, glad that she had come after all. Marceau thanked Petol for the invitation. The playwright asked if the man next to her was her fiancé, but Marceau explained that Darcy was just a friend to her. Suddenly, Petol recognized Darcy, which caused him to rush to apologize to him for misunderstanding the situation, but Darcy said that everything was fine. Darcy hugged Marceau and said that he was looking forward to the performance. Ledro, who was standing nearby and noticed Darcy's gesture, darkened. Darcy and Marceau were about to head into the hall when the girl noticed the one she would rather never see again. Lejuan was with a strange man, which surprised Marceau a little. Lejuan, noticing Marceau, greeted her and said that she had come to see a famous production and had no idea that Marceau might appear there. Marceau also curtsied in greeting and said that everything was fine, and also expressed the hope that Lejuan would like the production. In the hall, Marceau thought that Lejuan's appearance without Ryan at such an event was strange, but decided not to dwell on it. Darcy asked if the actors were going to perform the very play that Darcy watched with Marceau. The girl confirmed this and said that she did not expect then that this play would be so close to Darcy. Marceau wasn't sure Darcy would be comfortable watching the play again, but the man assured her that he was going to watch it more closely than anyone else. Marceau smiled genuinely. She liked Darcy's openness when he was with her. The production was a great success, and Marceau was proud to have had a hand in it and was confident that her idea of hinting at magical objects here was perfect. Petol, meanwhile, came on stage and expressed his gratitude to Marceau, without whom this production would not have taken place. But what surprised Marceau even more was that Petol seemed to read her thoughts and said that he hoped that someday Marceau's treasure, which had led to the production's success, would become known to everyone. Marceau smiled, realizing that Petol had just done exactly what she wanted. Looking at the happy artists, Marceau thought that she was very lucky to meet such a good troupe. Darcy, meanwhile, said the plot and acting were good, even though it was his second time seeing the play. Marceau asked if Darcy had enjoyed it, to which the man replied that it had been fine, but that he had enjoyed watching the plays at Marceau's house more, as he was still not used to being in a crowd of people, and then asked if Marceau would like to invite him to his chambers. Marceau blushed deeply once again that day after Darcy's words, thinking that no one could refuse him. In the end, Marceau actually invited Darcy to her place, even though they had already spent the whole day together. Marceau feared that this could lead to trouble due to unnecessary rumors that high society would certainly spread. Marceau shared her concerns with Darcy, but the man replied that he didn't care what they said about them, asking if Marceau was okay with being associated with him. Marceau wasn't against it, and neither was Darcy, so he didn't see any problems in the current situation. Marceau lay down tiredly on the bed, thinking that sometimes Darcy was very difficult to understand. Darcy was always confident in himself and did not let other people's opinions bother him. Darcy turned on the music at this time, and Marceau turned towards him in surprise. Darcy sat down on the bed, asking how Marceau was feeling. Placing his palm on Marceau's forehead, Darcy said that the girl looked more relaxed than before. After this, Darcy asked if Marceau wanted to keep the magical items a secret. The girl replied that she had indeed planned to do so at first, but now she was thinking about starting a business producing magical items. Marceau said she wanted to make such items publicly available, but she needed to find other mages to do so. Marceau said it would likely not be easy, but she was up for the challenge. Darcy asked, somewhat detachedly, whether such activities made Marceau happy. Marceau thought this business was a good idea to get revenge on Ryan, because it was supposed to deprive him of his future, but that was not the only reason Marceau wanted to do it. Marceau confidently told Darcy that she simply wanted to bring joy to people who were going through the same situation as her. For those people who are burnt out and want to relax at home, Marceau wanted to provide more options for spending time. Marceau believed that paintings that captured stories and memories gave people the strength to get back on their feet. Marceau responded that she believed that this could actually make her happy. Darcy, however, did not take this joyfully. The man became gloomy again. Darcy lowered his head and said that it would be difficult for him to help Marceau with her idea, after which he asked if the girl would listen to him. Meanwhile, Letty relayed to Ryan Marceau's words that she planned to break her confinement. Ryan thanked Letty and then said he had other things to do. Ryan entered the Emperor's room, greeting Kais, who even looked a little at home. Ryan decided not to make small talk and said that he fully assessed the situation. Ryan stated that he and the Emperor needed to deal with Darcy, but Kais responded that they couldn't do it alone. Kais informed Ryan that there was a treasure somewhere that could break the mind control, and then said that Ryan had to find this treasure. After this, Kais said that he and Ryan would need a weapon similar to Darcy's, even more powerful, which is why they needed an alliance with the Ephicles. The Ephekle clan was a Lejuan clan, which left Ryan very surprised. The Emperor explained that the Ephekle would not be able to refuse to cooperate, since they badly needed the Arcanium. Ryan asked what exactly the Emperor meant. Since the Ephekle family owned one Arcanium mine, Kais replied that the Arcanium reserves were running low and would soon disappear. This news shocked Ryan. He could not believe that the Arcanium reserves were disappearing. The Emperor didn't see Ryan's reaction. He was thinking about how they needed to put pressure on the mages to create a weapon more powerful than Darcy's gun. Ryan thought with displeasure that the Emperor was currently incapable of holding a proper conversation. Ryan decided not to try to get an answer from the Emperor, only saying that he would contact the Ephicles. The Emperor said that he had one more task for Ryan. The man had to make Marceau fall in love with him as much as possible. Ryan had a hard time keeping a straight face as he thought the Emperor was talking nonsense. But the next moment he remembered that rumors had already spread through society that Marceau and Darcy had appeared together at the theater. Marceau was the one whom Darcy, who had never shown interest in anyone, noticed. Ryan asked if this task was connected specifically with Darcy's attachment to Marceau. The Emperor replied that Ryan did have a head on his shoulders after all. The Emperor said that Darcy was not someone who showed emotions easily, but he managed to let Marceau get close to him so the girl could be used to control the man. Ryan thought that Marceau had definitely loved him before, but the last time they met, she had a very strange expression on her face. The Emperor said that this would also be good for Lejuan, because if Ryan was the crown prince, then Lejuan would also be protected. Ryan thought that the Emperor was right, because if Darcy became the crown prince, then he and Lejuan would be in danger. Ryan firmly said that if he was kind to Marceau, she would fall in love with him again. The Emperor replied that winning a woman's heart should be easy for Ryan, because he was like his father. Darcy, meanwhile, was collecting his thoughts to start a conversation with Marceau. Marceau tried to cheer him up and said that she was always ready to listen to him. Darcy said the story would be long and asked if he could lie down next to Marceau. Marceau thought that this was the first time Darcy had ever brought up sensitive topics around her, so she wanted to see his expression. But Marceau did not argue with Darcy and invited him to make himself comfortable next to her. Darcy wasted no time in lying down next to Marceau, thanking her for permission. Marceau looked closely at Darcy's face, which was very close to hers. Darcy said that his mother was a magician. She fell in love with the Emperor at first sight. Marceau thought that, although it was hard to believe now, but the Emperor used to be quite popular. It was not for nothing that Darcy and Ryan were so beautiful. Darcy said that the Emperor hated mages. Knight Germain was no exception. Because of the pain of unrequited love, the woman committed a terrible act that she should never have committed. She used her power to win the favor of the Emperor. Marceau asked what kind of power Darcy was talking about, what exactly his mother had done. Darcy said that he still doubted that telling Marceau about his power was the right decision, but explained that he really didn't want Marceau to find out about it from anyone else. Marceau knew how society treated mages, so she wanted to hear about it from Darcy. Marceau told Darcy this, explaining that other people would probably say something bad. Darcy smiled and said that sometimes he felt like Marceau was using a similar power on him because she was saying exactly what he wanted to hear from her. Marceau said it was probably because she and Darcy had a lot in common, and the man couldn't argue with that. Having made up his mind, Darcy confessed to Marceau that he could control people's minds. Marceau was surprised, but thought that she had previously assumed something like this. Kais was rather incompetent. He needed to somehow control the magicians, and Darcy, who was deprived of freedom of choice, helped him with this. Darcy asked Marceau tensely to tell him if his abilities frightened her, since even his father was afraid of them. Marceau calmly asked how exactly the mind control worked on Darcy. Darcy replied that all he had to do was call the man by name and look him in the eye. Marceau asked if there were any limitations to this power, as it didn't sound very comfortable, and Darcy asked if Marceau really wasn't afraid of him. Darcy said that he could control Marceau's mind and she wouldn't even notice. But the girl replied that she was absolutely sure that Darcy didn't use his abilities on her. Marceau said her feelings for Darcy developed from her own experiences. Darcy let out a noticeable sigh and said he was glad Marceau wasn't intimidated by his abilities. Darcy said that this power was more like a curse, and it was with its help that his mother won the favor of the Emperor, and the Emperor hated magicians even more after that. Darcy's mother wanted love, so she stopped keeping the Emperor under her control. When the man came to his senses, he wanted to kick the woman out, but she offered him something he could not refuse. Knight Germain gave the Emperor a son who had the same abilities as her, and allowed him to do with the boy whatever the Emperor wanted. After this, Knight Germain cast a spell on Darcy so that if he disobeyed the Emperor's order before he came of age, his heart would break. Marceau was horrified by what she had just heard. She couldn't believe that a woman could do this to her son. Darcy said that he could not escape the Emperor's orders, so he stood in his place on countless battlefields, taking the lives of countless people. Marceau was confused. She didn't know what to say to Darcy. She wasn't sure whether she should try to comfort him or keep quiet. Darcy said that it was for this very reason that simply wishing Marceau happiness was more than he could wish for. Darcy said that he couldn't wish for his own happiness. He just couldn't allow himself to be happy. Marceau was horrified to realize how much Darcy blamed himself for what he had to do. Marceau said indignantly that the Emperor was simply using Darcy. Darcy replied that it couldn't change the fact that he was the one doing all this. Marrow wondered sadly to herself how big the black shadow Darcy was hiding behind his smile was. Darcy had been used and controlled his entire life, yet he still managed to choose not bloody revenge on Kais, but voluntary exile. Instead of punishing the Emperor who had stained his entire life with hatred, Darcy decided to forget everything, but met Marceau. It was for Marceau's sake that Darcy decided to stay instead of leaving. Darcy gave up his own desires and plans just to make Marceau happy. Marceau smiled and said that she needed Darcy to do something if he really wanted her to be happy. Marceau said that in this case, Darcy should also promise to be happy. Marceau said that until this happens, she herself will not be able to be happy. Darcy looked incredulously at the hand that Marceau extended to him. Darcy was a little confused. He didn't expect Marceau to ask him exactly this. Darcy never thought that he would ever find happiness. As Darcy thought about this, the only thing he could think of was Marceau's smile. Darcy thought that it was Marceau who was his happiness. Suddenly the man caught himself wanting to touch the girl and kiss her. Darcy himself did not expect to feel anything like this, so he was confused at first. Darcy stepped back from Marceau, turning away from the girl. Darcy thought that he shouldn't think about Marceau in a romantic way, because this feeling would pass, and he just wanted to stay close to the girl. Marceau thought with regret that Darcy had to go through so much. Marceau tried to smile and said that it would definitely not be easy, so they could talk about this topic another time. Darcy looked at Marceau's lips at that moment and blushed desperately. Darcy stood up abruptly from the bed, turning away from Marceau so that she would not see his face. After that, Darcy said that they really should discuss this later and hurried away. Marceau, however, was thinking that Darcy was clearly having a hard time opening up to her. Marceau thought that the reason Darcy couldn't allow himself to be happy was because he felt guilty about the magicians. Marceau touched the camera and thought that with the help of magical items, she could help both the magicians and Darcy. The Empire regularly hunted down mages, with the exception of a few mages who publicly expressed hostility towards their brethren and swore allegiance to the Empire. Public opinion of the remaining mages was extremely negative. Some mages, oppressed by hatred and violence, rebelled against the Empire, and battles between them continued for many years, forming a vicious circle. One of the mysterious parts of this story was that although Kais could have destroyed the mages with Darcy's power, he did not do so. The Emperor tormented the mages with false hope, as if he wanted the mages to keep coming back and fighting. Marceau didn't understand why he needed this, but the Emperor clearly had to have a reason. The magicians, exhausted by long years of persecution, retreated into the forest, and Marceau's task now was to find them. Marceau thought that she had money, so she could very well help the magicians. Marceau understood that if she helped the magicians, the Emperor would be angry. People would spread bad rumors and put the girl in an awkward position. Marceau thought she had it all figured out, and Darcy was on her side. With Darcy's support, Marceau believed, she had nothing to fear. A butler came into Marceau's office and brought letters for Marceau. The girl asked him to leave them on the table. Marceau carefully studied the letters. The play had created a sensation. Now it remained to understand with whom it would be better to make acquaintances. But one letter infuriated Marceau. It was from Ryan, who asked the girl for a personal conversation. Marceau wondered if this was such a noble invitation to meet and cut off her head. Ryan wrote that he would not accept a negative answer, but Marceau thought with irritation that she should write a refusal immediately. Marceau thought that Ryan simply couldn't possibly still think that she was in love with him. Wanting to tear up the letter, Marceau noticed that there was a second page in the letter. Ryan wrote that the reason there was a ball coming up at the palace where he wanted to meet Marceau was because of Darcy. Marceau thought that if this was related to Darcy, then she really should have attended this ball. Darcy had disappeared after his last walk, which had Kaiser very worried about. He had not appeared in his office for a day. Kaiser decided to enter Darcy's room. Having warned her beforehand that he was coming in, Darcy leaned back wearily in his chair, clearly deep in thought. Kaiser assumed that he was thinking about imperial affairs, but Darcy disagreed with this assumption. Kaiser asked what was on Darcy's mind at the time, but the man said he saw no reason why he should tell Kaiser anything. Darcy added that he didn't understand why he had to report to Kaiser at all. After this, Darcy straightened up and assumed that since Kaiser had come in person, he must have some interesting news. Kaiser thought in passing that Darcy's image was most suitable for the prince. Kaiser reported that Ryan had met with the Emperor and, although Kaiser had not been able to hear everything, their motive for the meeting was quite obvious. Darcy demanded that Kaiser report everyone Ryan came into contact with. Darcy thought that destroying Ryan and the Emperor along with their allies in one blow would be no fun at all. Darcy planned to give them some breathing room, and when they thought they had a glimmer of hope, the man wanted to bury them alive. Darcy's expression turned terrifying for a moment, but the one whose opinion was important to him could not see it. Darcy thought that only by prolonging the moment could he enjoy his revenge. After this, Darcy thought that it would be humane after all, because he did not want to frighten Marceau. Darcy ordered Kaizen to secretly contact all the mages who had any connection to the palace and inform them that Darcy wanted to meet with them, after which he threw Kaizen a cloak. Darcy explained that the cloak had an arcanium sewn into it, which would allow Kaizen to track Ryan and remain undetected. Kaizen thanked Darcy and asked how the preparations for the ball that would be held in Darcy's honor were going. Darcy had clearly heard about this for the first time. Kaizen explained that a ball would soon be held, at which all the aristocrats of the Empire would be present. Darcy answered honestly that it was the first time he heard about it, which made Kaizen a little taken aback. Darcy said that he needed to prepare carefully since there would be aristocrats at this ball. Darcy smiled contentedly and said that he must look as good as possible for Marceau. On the day of the ball, the maid was getting Marceau ready, surprised that the girl had chosen a rather modest outfit. The maid asked if Marceau was sure she didn't want to wear something brighter, but the girl thought her dress was perfect. Marceau thought about how she wasn't the star of the show, so she didn't want any extra attention. She just needed to give Darcy a gift. The box contained an arcanium, which was meant to show that Marceau fully supported Darcy. Marceau's carriage pulled up to the imperial palace, and the girl noted with surprise the amount of transport. Everyone came to see Darcy, but clearly not all of them had pure intentions. Marceau stepped out of the carriage, thinking that she had not seen Darcy for quite some time. Marceau was visibly nervous, wondering if Darcy had thought about her words. Marceau couldn't wait to meet Darcy, planning to check out the ballroom first. But along the way, Marceau met a completely different person than she would have liked. Ryan appeared right in front of Marceau. The girl thought that he was really annoying her. Even Ryan's voice sounded disgusting to Marceau. The girl didn't want to hear it. Marceau bowed and said politely that Lejuan was due here any minute. Marceau wanted to leave, but Ryan stopped her, saying that he needed to talk to the girl. Marceau asked to speak faster because people were watching, and Lejuan was supposed to appear soon. Ryan said the conversation would take some time, then invited her to go into a separate room. It was too tiring for Marceau, but this time she decided to agree with Ryan. When Marceau entered the room, Ryan slammed the door behind her and got too close to the girl. Seeing Marceau's reaction, Ryan thought that this was exactly what she wanted from him, for them to be alone so close. Marceau, however, thought that being so close to Ryan was disgusting to her. Ryan said he thought about it for a moment and decided he had been too harsh on Marceau. After this, Ryan apologized to Marceau, which shocked the girl at first. Marceau looked at Ryan and wondered if this man really thought she was such a fool. Ryan didn't apologize when Letty's spying was revealed, but now he hoped that Marceau would break up. Marceau realized that Ryan thought she was still the same Marceau who had been in love with him. Marceau was curious why Ryan needed her to continue loving him. Marceau wondered what exactly Ryan could get from her love. However, Marceau very quickly guessed that, in all likelihood, the matter was with Darcy. Marceau understood that she was the only person close to Darcy so far, so those around her might think that she could be used. Marceau chuckled. It would really take something big to make Ryan apologize. Marceau thought that in that case it was time to finally convey to Ryan that the previous Marceau was no more. Marceau smiled, placed her hand on her heart and said she was very glad that Ryan finally believed her. Ryan, believing that Marceau had already fallen for his trick, began his next monologue with satisfaction, but the girl interrupted him. Marceau said that this meant that she and Ryan could finally end it all, since Ryan had always confronted the girl about her feelings. Ryan's tone was icy as he asked what exactly Marceau meant by that. Marceau, keeping her cool, said she was very glad that Ryan had finally realized that she no longer loved him. Marceau said that because Ryan did not understand this in the past, he bullied Marceau, accusing her of lying. Ryan tried to say that he believed that Marceau would not try to harm Lejuan again. Marceau said she thought it meant the same thing. If she didn't like Ryan, then she didn't bother Lejuan. The only reason Marceau would bother Lejuan was Ryan. So Marceau thought that if she didn't pester Lejuan anymore, Ryan would simply have no proof that she still loved him. Marceau was pleased to see Ryan was shocked and then moved closer to him. Marceau asked if Ryan had foreseen that she would be able to answer him and tell him that she no longer had feelings for him. Ryan was clearly annoyed that all his plans had gone down the drain. Marceau noted to herself that Ryan's gaze now showed confusion. Marceau was glad that finally all the unspoken things between her and Ryan had disappeared. Marceau was pleased that she was able to put Ryan in his place. Marceau chuckled, thinking that this was the first time Ryan had met the real Marceau. Marceau asked if she understood correctly that Ryan believed her that she would not touch Lejuan again. Marceau thought this was her chance to put an end to all this drama, and she was also curious about what Ryan was going to do about it. Ryan was confused and couldn't find the words to answer the girl. After which Ryan asked if Marceau really didn't love him anymore, which shocked the girl because there was regret in his voice. Marceau asked if this was what Ryan wanted, since she would not touch Lejuan again. Ryan asked gloomily why, in that case, Marceau would break her confinement and agree to meet him, after which he began to approach the girl closer and closer. Marceau was frozen, because when she locked herself in the house, it was clearly not for Ryan's sake. Marceau was thinking about how Ryan, who kept coming closer, was scaring her when there was an explosion. Ryan stared at the door in confusion, asking what just happened. Darcy appeared in the settling dust, jokingly stating what he had just done. Darcy said that Ryan was pathetic for doing this to Marceau. Ryan indignantly asked if Darcy had any idea what he was aiming at. Darcy and Marceau looked at each other, trying to find the trace that had caused such a violent reaction. Darcy smiled widely, and Marceau thought that this smile was only for herself today. Marceau also realized that she couldn't help but feel admiration for Darcy. Marceau didn't pay attention to the fact that she was not the only one in the room next to Darcy. Extending her hand to the man, Marceau suggested that Darcy leave such an event. Marceau looked around carefully as Darcy led her among the various very curious people. From the looks everyone was giving Darcy, it was clear that no one had missed the explosion. Marceau asked why Darcy had done this at all, and the man replied that he had put both high society and Ryan in their place. Marceau asked what impression Darcy wanted people to make. Darcy replied that he would like to appear to be a madman whom no one would dare to mess with. Marceau smiled and said that in that case, Darcy had done absolutely the right thing. Marceau patted Darcy on the shoulder and said he had done a great job. Darcy asked, somewhat distantly, whether the pat on the shoulder had been some kind of compliment on Marceau's part. Marceau responded in surprise that since Darcy didn't like it, she wouldn't do it again. Darcy replied that Marceau should continue. Moreover, the man knelt down in front of the girl and asked Marceau to stroke his head. Darcy smiled genuinely and added that Marceau should have called him a good boy. This was definitely a new experience for Marceau, who was a little confused by Darcy's actions. Marceau thought about how Darcy had put her in a difficult position by kneeling before her and asking her such embarrassing things in front of everyone. Marceau angrily asked Darcy to get up, but the man replied that he would only do so if Marceau patted him on the head. Darcy looked into Marceau's eyes and said that she only needed to pet him a little. Marceau reached out her hand to Darcy's head, but froze, thinking that it was somehow strange to stroke a friend's head. Marceau felt that she was crossing the line. For Darcy it was still forgivable since he might not know the rules of etiquette, but not for her. Darcy took Marceau's hand, pressed it to his cheek, and asked him to stroke him finally. After such persistent requests, Marceau finally gave in and actually petted Darcy. Marceau tried to reassure herself with the thought that she would only allow Darcy such a liberty once. From the outside, the image of Marceau stroking Darcy's head must have looked funny. Darcy was clearly enjoying himself and didn't care how others would take it. Marceau, however, thought with a smile that Darcy's hair was very soft. A grown man bent down in front of a girl in the middle of the corridor, his head stretched forward and his eyes closed. It could have been funny, but to Marceau it didn't even seem strange anymore. Marceau wondered if she looked as peaceful when she was relaxing with Darcy at home. Marceau thought that with the title of Prince Darcy would receive more responsibilities. She wanted to believe that his future did not hold any difficulties. Darcy suddenly asked if Marceau thought he was strange because he couldn't bring himself to be serious around her. After this, Darcy rose from his knee. Marceau replied that she could only consider him strange if she did not know about his past. Darcy looked away and said that he found it difficult to pinpoint exactly what emotions he felt for Marceau. Marceau thought that she understood Darcy in this because she herself could not determine what kind of relationship there was between them. Marceau didn't understand whether there was romance or friendship between them, just as she couldn't understand what she herself wanted from Darcy. Marceau kept telling herself that she and Darcy needed to draw boundaries with each other, but every time a man approached her, Marceau found herself reaching out to him. Marceau invited Darcy to continue the conversation they had just finished in her room. Marceau said that they both don't have answers for each other, so they should follow their hearts. Marceau thought that if it was about Darcy, she didn't want to regret anything. This man had changed his life for her, so it would be wrong to hastily evaluate or assume the depth of his feelings. Marceau said relationships are always complicated and it's okay to feel confused. Darcy said it's the first time he's been told it's okay to be confused. Marceau replied that even such a state is part of a person and his life. Darcy said that Marceau always had answers to his questions, and the girl had never been wrong in her assumptions. Marceau blushed at the compliment and her heart skipped a beat. Marceau turned around sharply, trying to hide her embarrassment from Darcy, and suggested that they finally leave the corridor. The palace, meanwhile, had become a buzzing swarm, with people discussing Darcy. As she passed people, Marceau noticed that rumors about Darcy were multiplying, but the man replied that he didn't care. Marceau and Darcy approached the throne room. Marceau asked if Darcy was ready for the coronation. Darcy didn't answer. Marceau looked at the man. He looked quite calm. Marceau was in no hurry to control anything else either. She watched as Darcy adjusted his suit. Darcy noticed Marceau's gaze on him and asked her what was wrong. Marceau said that since she was giving Darcy answers to all his questions, it was his turn to give her an answer. The girl asked what exactly could make Darcy happy. Marceau said Darcy deserves to be happy too, so she doesn't plan to back down until the man gives her an answer. Marceau said that if Darcy didn't tell her, she could look for the answer herself. But Marceau emphasized to Darcy that this was the first time she had asked him for a favor. Opening the doors to the throne room, Marceau turned to Darcy, smiled, and said that she would wait for his answer. Darcy didn't know what to answer Marceau right now. He was a little confused. Darcy watched as Marceau entered the throne room first. Marceau didn't feel too comfortable in this room. The chandeliers were shining so brightly that they blinded her eyes. The ceiling was so high that it seemed to pierce the sky, just as the sharp gazes pierced Marceau's back. Marceau thought she was now certain that she was back in high society when she had to smile falsely at people who greeted her just as falsely. Suddenly, the one who stood out from the general fake crowd approached Marceau. Lejuan decided to greet Marceau as well, although Marceau would still prefer to avoid meeting her. Marceau, however, also greeted Lejuan, saying she was glad to meet him. Marceau was already prepared for an unpleasant conversation, but Lejuan surprised her. The girl simply turned around and left. Marceau looked after Lejuan in surprise, not quite understanding how she felt about her former friend's behavior. Marceau thought that Lejuan had changed, that she no longer felt warm, as if she no longer expected anything from Marceau. Marceau had been waiting for this moment for so long, but in the end it wasn't as pleasant as she expected. The girl decided that it was worth forgetting about it, because it could hurt her if she didn't continue to keep her distance from Lejuan. Meanwhile, Marceau was surrounded by ladies and gentlemen eager for gossip, who were very interested in why Marceau had not left the house recently. Marceau thought that, as she thought, everyone was interested in this question. After her disappearance, many rumors arose, but no one was able to get to the bottom of the truth. Marceau thought that society thought it was unusual for her to do nothing wrong, and it was this attitude that she was tired of. Marceau thought for a long time about how to explain the situation to people, but Ryan suddenly helped with his obsessive talk, so Marceau answered those around her that a lot had happened during this time, but at least she managed to settle the misunderstanding with Ryan. Marceau said she had cleared things up with Ryan about the rumors that she was chasing him out of unrequited love, and the girl complained that it was hard to be misunderstood. Of course, everyone wondered if Ryan Marceau had fallen out of favor, and the girl confirmed that this was what had happened. Marceau said that Ryan felt like she was jealous of Lejuan, but the truth was that it was never the case, and Ryan was finally able to admit it. Marceau added that she sincerely wishes Lejuan and Ryan happiness. After this, public attention switched to the topic of Darcy and Marceau's acquaintance. Marceau replied that Darcy had helped her a lot, as he had helped the whole country, and then took a sip of champagne. Marceau thought that Darcy had really done too much for this country. When the emperor took credit for his victories, the girl hoped that sooner or later the world would find out who the real hero was. Marceau said that Darcy was exceptionally competent in all matters, and she could not hide her respect for the honor of serving such a prince. After this, Marceau decided that now was the most opportune moment and ordered gifts to be brought for Darcy. Marceau's subordinate specifically pointed out that the box with the arcanium was delivered safely. Whispers went around the hall, and Marceau confirmed with a smile that she really was going to give Darcy the arcanium stones. After this, everyone flocked to Marceau, wanting to invite her to tea parties, dinners, and other events. Marceau, with a polite smile, asked them to take turns. She was distracted from the noise around Marceau by Ryan and Lejuan, whom she saw a little further down the hall. Marceau thought that Ryan and Lejuan should have stuck together. But Lejuan surprised Marceau again. The girl clearly did not plan to stay with Ryan. Ryan tried to say something to Lejuan, but the girl simply turned around and left him alone. Marceau didn't understand what could have happened between Ryan and Lejuan, because they came to every banquet together. Marceau closed her eyes and thought that it didn't concern her, so there was no point in focusing her attention on this couple. The priest, meanwhile, announced that it was time to begin the coronation ceremony of the crown prince. Marceau thought that this moment had finally arrived. Darcy had been waiting for this for too long. Marceau watched with pride as Darcy walked towards the throne. She truly believed that he was worthy of wearing the crown. Darcy, who had lived in the shadows for too long, finally received official recognition of his rightful status. The emperor rose from his throne and announced that he had gathered everyone in this hall to celebrate the birth of a new prince. The emperor approached Darcy and said that he had thought long and hard about the situation and decided that the appearance of a second prince would be an excellent stimulus for Ryan's growth. The emperor placed the crown on Darcy's head, declaring to him that, as Darcy had wished, he was now a prince. After this, the emperor turned around and returned to his throne, and Darcy took off his crown. Darcy twirled the crown on his finger, noting with a grin that his appearance could be an incentive not only for Ryan's growth, because anything could always happen. The emperor was outraged by Darcy's insolence and indignantly asked how he dared to behave like that. Darcy chuckled and said that the emperor should not pay attention to him. Marceau looked at Darcy, perfectly understanding why he was behaving this way. Darcy, who was still twirling the crown on his finger, caught Marceau's eye. Darcy smiled genuinely at Marceau, focusing his attention on her for a few moments. Marceau thought that Darcy's smile could really charm anyone. Darcy remembered about decency and thanked everyone for coming, despite each person's personal reasons. Darcy smiled softly and said that he had great hopes for everyone here in the near future. In a cooler tone, Darcy said he hoped people would make decisions they would not regret later, adding that he looked forward to meeting everyone. Marceau thought Darcy was perfect for the role of the prince. Darcy was definitely more suited to being in the spotlight than to being kept in the shadows. Suddenly, something happened that Marceau simply could not have expected at this ceremony. Lejuan, who was close to Marceau, swayed and began to fall, forcing Marceau to catch her. Marceau looked in surprise at Lejuan, who lay unconscious on her lap. Marceau was glad she had managed to hold Lejuan's head, but she couldn't understand why the girl was so cold. Grandfather Lejuan immediately ran up to the girls, checking on Lejuan's condition. The grandfather asked the girl to open her eyes, and Kaiser sat down next to her. Marceau thought that, fortunately for her, she had fallen together with Lejuan, so no one should think that it was her fault for the girl's condition. Kaiser picked up Lejuan in his arms and declared that he would take the girl to the doctor. Grandfather Lejuan intercepted the girl from Kaiser and said that she was his granddaughter, so he was the one to carry the girl. Grandfather thanked Marceau for catching Lejuan and said that he would repay her later for it. Marceau replied that everything was fine and asked with genuine concern what had happened to her former friend. Grandfather replied gloomily that they had no idea what had happened to Lejuan. Ryan approached Grandpa Lejuan and asked permission to accompany them. Grandpa didn't mind. They left the throne room, leaving everyone confused about what just happened. Darcy walked up to Marceau, who was still sitting on the floor, extended his hand to her and asked if she wanted to get up. Marceau, coming out of her state of detachment and realizing where she was, actually tried to get up. Darcy had just had time to ask if Marceau was hurt when she felt a sharp pain in her ankle. Marceau said she appeared to have sprained her ankle slightly. Darcy sighed and said that it seemed that Marceau needed to rest. Marceau wanted to call her maid, but Darcy simply picked her up in his arms. Marceau, who had a good idea of the rumors that would now circulate, tried to be indignant. People around immediately began to whisper that Marceau and Darcy must have been together. Marceau blushed and said she could have just called an escort. Darcy replied that if he himself took Marceau to the doctor, it would clearly be faster. Darcy added that it would also be safer, and Marceau couldn't argue with him. As Darcy was about to leave the hall with Marceau, they were caught up by Kaiser, who asked permission to go with them. Darcy didn't chase Kaiser away in front of everyone, but when they went out into the corridor, he asked why the hell the knight decided to follow them. Kaiser replied that he wanted to accompany Lejuan, which Darcy clearly guessed. Darcy asked if Kaiser had anything he wanted to say to Marceau since he was tagging along. Kaiser lowered his head and forced himself to thank Marceau for helping Lejuan earlier. Darcy threw a wave of cold fury at Kaiser and said that was not what he had meant at all. Marceau, sensing Darcy's mood, hastened to calm him down and said that she did not need anything from Kaiser. Marceau explained that she had not had any hopes for Kaiser for a long time because he could not even come to terms with the fact that the girl had really changed. Marceau said that Kaiser's pride had probably already been hurt by Grandfather Lejuan's lack of attention, so it would be right for her to rise above it and show understanding to the man. Kaiser didn't answer, but he thought with indignation that his pride had not been hurt, since it was logical that Grandpa Lehuan had followed Ryan. After this, Kaiser suddenly wondered if Marceau had always been like this. In the past, she either ignored Kaiser or tried to gain his trust in order to get to Ryan. Kaiser didn't quite understand which Marceau was the real one. Kaiser suggested that Marceau might indeed have changed, but decided not to judge it yet. Darcy walked out into the yard. Marceau thought it was surprisingly pleasant to be in this man's arms. And suddenly Marceau remembered the rules of decency, asking Darcy if he understood that he was obliged to return to the ball. Darcy replied that they were almost there, and that he had already shown his face quite enough at this event. Kaiser clearly recognized the road they were taking and also became very tense, asking if they were going where he thought they were going. Darcy replied that Kaiser was right, which was why Darcy didn't want him to go with them. Marceau asked where exactly they were going. Darcy replied that he was taking her to Robart, the court physician. Kaiser angrily stated that Robart should have been busy treating Lehuan. Darcy replied gloomily that he didn't care about Lehuan, especially considering that Marceau had suffered because of her. Marceau tried to convince Darcy that she was perfectly fine, but the man would not listen to her. Marceau sighed and muttered that someone was too eager to take her to the court physician. Kaiser said that in that case he would go first, so as not to frighten Lejuan by bursting into the office in a crowd. But Kaiser didn't even have time to open the door. A female healer appeared on the threshold. Looking at Robart, it was immediately clear that she was a doctor, and you wanted to trust her. Darcy said that it was Robart who treated him many times when he played the role of Kais. Kaiser stood in front of Robart, confused, and Darcy thought it didn't look like the woman had any patience. Kaiser, having clarified the details with Robart, told Darcy that Lehuan had not been brought to her, although the attendant had visited the doctor. Marceau found it strange that Lejuan did not consult the court physician. Her condition seemed serious to her. Robartha, meanwhile, approached Darcy and greeted him, saying that she was glad to meet him. Darcy suggested that Robart go inside to check Marceau's leg. In the office, Marceau was seated on a chair, and Robart warned her that she would have to lift the girl's dress a little to examine her. Darcy, hearing about this, declared that he would rather wait outside, trying to head for the exit. Marceau stopped Darcy, saying that it was just an ankle, so he could very well stay. It didn't take much convincing for Darcy. Robartha examined Marceau's leg carefully, identified a sprain, and said that Marceau must have been in pain on the way to her. Marceau blushed and replied that she didn't have to go herself, so she didn't feel any pain. Robart applied a strongly herbal-smelling ointment to Marceau's ankle. Very quickly, Marceau realized that the pain from the sprain went away like magic. Robart said she would gather some herbs for Marceau and give her some flat-heeled shoes. Marceau sincerely thanked Robart and noted that she was a wonderful doctor. Marceau got up from her chair to check her leg and said she could definitely walk on her own now, and the pain was gone. Darcy suggested that Marceau return to the palace together, but Robart called out to the man. Robart leaned over and asked if she could speak to Darcy. Darcy asked if this concerned Marceau's well-being. Robart replied that it concerned Darcy himself. Robart suggested that Darcy would be more comfortable talking to her alone. Darcy replied that if Robart had wanted to say something but couldn't in front of Marceau, she should simply forget about it. Roberto said she understood Darcy and then handed him the jug. Roberto said burning too much incense makes the air stale. After this, Roberto said that she was very glad to see Darcy in good health, which greatly surprised the man. Robart said that the longer a person lives in the palace, the more secrets he accumulates. The woman always felt terrible about this. Darcy realized that Robart remembered him from the time when he was Kaisa's puppet and came to her for treatment, hiding behind a mask. Robart said that she had neither the strength nor the courage to stand up for Darcy then, but she never forgot about him. Robart said she really did everything she could do. Darcy turned around and, as he was leaving, answered Robart that he had not expected anything from her. The door closed behind Darcy, and Marceau noticed the man's slightly dejected state. Marceau asked worriedly if Darcy was okay. Darcy replied that it was quite funny that Robart remembered him. Marceau asked if he was offended by the woman. Darcy replied that he never asked her for help, so he had nothing to be offended about. Darcy said he was simply surprised that Robart felt the need to apologize. Marceau thought that Darcy had accepted the incense from Robartha, which meant he was definitely not angry with the woman. Darcy and Marceau were quickly approached by Kaiser, who stated that he was glad they were finally out. Kaiser politely asked Darcy to use magic to find Le Huan's location, but Darcy refused. Kaiser again tried to convince Darcy to help him, saying that he was desperate. Darcy didn't have time to answer. He heard someone heading straight towards them. Darcy noticed that the building next to Robartha should have been empty, but the footsteps were heard there. Marceau was at a loss. She did not understand what Darcy was talking about, because she herself did not hear anything. Darcy took Marceau by the shoulders and moved her so that she was in the bushes. Marceau crouched down out of sight and asked what was wrong. Darcy replied that he wasn't sure, but he thought it was better that they weren't seen. For this reason, Darcy suggested watching what was happening from the bushes. Meanwhile, two unknown people appeared in the line of sight, carrying a box with something. The box emitted a soft, purple light, leading Marceau to speculate that it might contain arcanium. This became obvious when the men managed to drop the box. Kaiser, who had also settled in the bushes, asked if Darcy thought these people were smuggling. Darcy replied that it didn't look like smuggling when Grandfather Le Huan emerged from the empty building. Grandfather ordered to bring the arcanium inside the building as quickly as possible. Darcy frowned as he noticed Ryan among those carrying the box inside, finding it odd that they had headed for the annex in complete secrecy, even though Robart was right next door. Darcy told Kaiser that Le Huan was most likely in that annex, allowing the man to check if this was true. And Le Huan really did appear on the threshold of the extension, the girl already looking a little healthier. Kaiser ran up to Le Huan in excitement and asked her how she was feeling. Kaiser asked if they had figured out what happened to Le Huan, and the girl replied that she had simply been overexerted. Le Huan said she was told she had caused a lot of concern, and she suggested that they return to the ballroom together. Marceau, watching from the bushes, noted with surprise that Le Huan looked completely healthy. Marceau wondered if the arcanium stones were related to Le Huan's condition, and also why her grandfather and Ryan never came out of the annex. Darcy, deciding that they had seen enough, suggested that Marceau leave. Darcy said that the whole situation was not worth worrying about on Marceau's part. Darcy asked if they should return to the palace. Marceau replied that she was not very keen on returning, so Darcy suggested they run away. Darcy replied that there was still time before the end of the ball, so they could very well go somewhere. Marceau asked where exactly Darcy wanted to take her. The man smiled and replied that they could go to his chambers. Standing at the door to his room, Darcy apologized to Marceau for the mess, explaining that he himself was not very tidy and he had no servants. After this, Darcy opened the door for Marceau. The girl was curious about what exactly she would see there, where Darcy had spent almost his entire life. The room was indeed a little messy, but everything looked very organized, which was typical for Darcy. The only thing that bothered Marceau was the smell of incense. Darcy noticed Marceau's discomfort and asked if the smell of the incense was too strong for her. Marceau didn't deny it, and Darcy quickly opened the window to let some air into the room. After this, Darcy decided to brag to Marceau and handed over to her the item that saved him in the situation with the Emperor. Darcy said he believed that Marceau should have named the object. Marceau called it a gun. Darcy said he liked the name because it was quite simple and straightforward. Darcy folded his arms across his chest and suddenly said that he needed to think of a strategy to overthrow Kai's. Marceau asked why Darcy had suddenly decided to think about strategy. Darcy explained that he needed a method of fighting that did not involve the use of magic. Since Kai's had already seen the gun, he could create something more dangerous. Darcy said he needed to create a weapon far more powerful than Kai's could before the arcanium supply ran out. Marceau was surprised that the arcanium supply was running low. Darcy explained that arcanium was a very limited resource that could soon run out, just like mages. Marceau suggested that the mage's abilities were fading because they were not being used. Darcy said that maybe it was for the best. Marceau's face darkened when she saw Darcy's reaction and asked him to sit down next to her. Marceau confidently told Darcy that she would like to meet the magicians. Darcy asked in surprise why Marceau needed this. Because she had him, Darcy could easily create any enchanted objects. Marceau explained that she would like to help the magicians, first by opening a business with them. The girl said that she is sure that this will help Darcy himself. Marceau said she believes that the lives of magicians can be improved and that this could be a starting point for Darcy in his search for happiness. Marceau was sure of this since Darcy was also a magician, albeit one who had to kill his own kind against his will. Marceau looked at Darcy, trying to figure out if her words had reached his heart. Darcy sat hunched over with his face in his hands, so Marceau couldn't understand his reaction. Marceau wanted to ask what happened, but Darcy asked her not to look at him. Darcy said he was sure he looked extremely stupid at that moment. Marceau, confused, said that Darcy simply couldn't look stupid. Marceau thought that even Darcy's ears had turned red, which seemed very cute to her. Darcy exhaled sharply, cleared his throat, and said that apparently he had finally managed to pull himself together. Darcy said he could speed up Marceau's meeting with the mages if that was what she needed. Darcy explained that only mages know where mages live, but not all of them can get to these places. Darcy said that he was the one responsible for the magicians being able to disappear. This shocked Marceau. She was interested in how this happened and what happened. Darcy explained that it happened when he was bewitched and could not disobey the Emperor's orders. Darcy has killed countless mages, but unfortunately not all of them. Cais gave the order to spare several of the mages he had chosen, which was consistent with what Marceau knew about it. Marceau asked if Darcy knew why Cais had suddenly done this, but he did not reveal his reasons. Whatever the reason, Darcy couldn't go against the Emperor, but he thought that once he managed to escape the curse, he could provide a safe place for the mages to live. It was for this reason that the mages eventually disappeared. Darcy provided them with shelter. Marceau said sincerely that it was incredible and amazing. Darcy said darkly that he did it out of guilt. He shouldn't have done bad things in the first place. Marceau countered that many people don't even feel guilty. Marceau said that in any case, what Darcy did was great. The girl wanted to know how to find the magicians. She also asked if they knew that it was Darcy who helped organize the shelter. The man replied that they did not. Darcy said that no one would use his hideout. Suddenly an idea came to the man. Darcy said that if the mages thought that Marceau had organized the shelter, they might like the idea, especially since it was Marceau who gave Darcy the arcanium with which he created the shelter. Marceau smiled and asked why Darcy was suddenly trying to hide from praise and was embarrassed, although he was usually very brave. Darcy replied that he was an enemy to the mages, plus there was a chance that Marceau would simply not be listened to unless she did something significant. The magicians were indeed very friendly with each other, but they were distrustful of strangers, especially nobles. To overcome long-held prejudices about mages, Marceau needed to be able to offer something of great value, and being a villain who used enchanted items would help as well. Marceau didn't like the idea of reclaiming her villainous status, but she was willing to do it for the sake of the mages and Darcy. Marceau said she would try and ask Darcy to tell her where the mages were. Darcy voiced his concerns that Marceau might be hurt, but the girl simply put her finger to his lips. Marceau said she understood that Darcy was worried about her, but right now she needed his faith in her. Marceau was truly tired of trying to break other people's prejudices, but she was willing to try again. At least this time, Marceau had someone she could definitely rely on. This man always believed in Marceau, so she always had the strength to rise. It was because of Darcy that, whatever the outcome, Marceau could learn from this experience, and so she was grateful to the man. Marceau thanked Darcy. The man did not understand why Marceau suddenly decided to thank him and asked what exactly she was thanking him for. Marceau replied that she was simply grateful for everything to Darcy, who was an amazing person. Marceau said that sooner or later she would tell the magicians that it was he who built the shelter for them. Darcy sighed and said that it was more than enough for him that Marceau felt that way about the situation. Darcy invited Marceau to listen to music, and the girl was surprised that he had a record player. Darcy explained that he listened to music when he was alone. He asked what Marceau would like to listen to, but the girl replied that in his chambers, Darcy should choose the music. Darcy agreed and put on a piano sonata that began with a major and minor chord. Marceau, listening carefully to the melody, thought that it suited Darcy very well. Darcy did not notice that there were incense sticks next to Marceau and hurried to remove them, but the girl said that they smelled nice and asked to light them. Darcy smiled and said that he didn't mind at all that Marceau was disrupting his usual routine. Marceau said that in that case they could do without incense, but use the sticks that Robart had given them. Marceau held out the jug to Darcy, their hands touched, and Darcy blushed again. Darcy said he found Marceau's hands more intriguing than the incense, and asked if he could look at Marceau's palms. Marceau was surprised by Darcy's request. She did not understand how her palm could help him. Marceau's satisfied smile told her that he was just making a joke again to embarrass her. Marceau jokingly accused Darcy of this, but the man simply replied that he was guilty. In any case, Darcy was curious as to why Robart had given him the jug of incense. Darcy tilted the jug and a pendant fell from it onto his hand, which greatly surprised the man. Marceau asked what kind of pendant it was, since Darcy clearly recognized it. The man replied that it was an imperial treasure. It was an item that could protect against mind control. Marceau noted that Robart had clearly taken a great risk to give the pendant to Darcy, so she must have cared for it. Darcy looked at the pendant with a smile and said that he thought Robart was on Kaisa's side. After this, Darcy handed the pendant to Marceau and said that it would be better if she kept it. Darcy said that no one would think that the pendant was Marceau's, plus it would definitely look good on a girl. Marceau looked at the pendant in her hands in confusion. She was pleased that Darcy trusted her, but she also felt a little uneasy. Darcy said the pendant would protect Marceau from mind control, but it was worth remembering that Ryan was looking for this treasure. Marceau replied that no one would think of searching her estate, plus she was completely confident that Darcy would not control her mind. Darcy said that in that case Marceau could have just worn the pendant under her clothes so that people wouldn't see. Marceau asked if it wouldn't have been better to hide the pendant on Darcy. Darcy replied that it would be better if Marceau had the pendant, because who knows, maybe he would decide to use mind control on her after all. Marceau thought that Darcy's abilities did not frighten her at all. Whatever side Marceau Darcy showed, he remained the man who was always ready to listen to her. It was Darcy who saw Marceau as she was, and that is why this man forever took a place in the girl's heart. Darcy said that he was not joking at all. He was not sure that he would not become more cruel to the girl when he realized exactly what he felt for her. Darcy said that he did not want to do to Marceau what his mother did to the Emperor, so he asked her to wear the pendant anyway. Darcy was truly afraid because he was not confident in himself. Marceau sighed heavily and said that she agreed to wear the pendant. Marceau explained that she agreed not because she didn't trust Darcy, but only because he asked her. After this, Marceau handed Darcy the chain and asked her to help her put on the pendant. Darcy fastened the chain, after which he thoughtfully said that next to Marceau he became very shy and felt afraid. Darcy said thoughtfully that he was usually not like this at all, but around Marceau he changed. Marceau felt Darcy's fingers on her neck, which made her feel embarrassed. Marceau's cheeks turned red again, and the girl thought that she was once again embarrassed over nothing. Darcy moved a little away from Marceau, and the girl thought that it was good that he did not see her face. After this, Darcy said that he had one request for the girl. Darcy said there was something he wanted to do with Marceau right now. Marceau said that Darcy could do whatever he wanted, and the girl promised to let him know if she didn't like it. Marceau blushed even more deeply, thinking that this might sound rather ambiguous. Darcy smiled and said that in that case Marceau should not be indignant later. Darcy knelt before Marceau and said that he would like his feelings for the girl to be exclusively beautiful and respectful. Darcy said that despite his desire, his feelings were still somewhat dirty, after which Darcy tenderly kissed Marceau's hand, causing her to blush again. Marceau's heart skipped a beat, and the girl herself froze in place, clearly not wanting to push Darcy away. Darcy stroked Marceau's hand, looking at her fingers with a thoughtful smile. Darcy said that he had to let Marceau go now because he was not sure what else he might do if he did not do it now, and wished the girl good night. That same night in the palace, Grandfather Lehuan recalled that his granddaughter was not expected to live more than 15 years. His daughter fell in love with a worthless man, gave birth to Lehuan and abandoned her. The grandfather simply could not part with his only remaining family. The year Lehuan turned 15, her grandfather extended her life with the help of arcanium, but the longer the arcanium kept her alive, the more stones were required. Grandfather Lehuan thought that they needed more arcanium, but the situation was not in their favor now. The man was worried about the fate of his granddaughter. This excitement was noticed by Lehuan, who asked if her grandfather was feeling well. Grandpa replied that he was perfectly fine, just a little surprised when Lehuan fell. Lehuan felt sorry for worrying her grandfather, and she also felt sorry for causing trouble for Ryan, which is why she planned to send the man a token of her gratitude. Grandpa Lehuan noted that he hadn't seen Ryan at their mansion in a long time. Lehuan said that she simply didn't invite him. When asked why, Lehuan said she simply needed time to reflect on herself. Grandfather noted that Lehuan had no faults to worry about, but the girl replied that she had failed to stand up for her friend when he needed it. Lehuan said she avoided a lot of things simply because she felt they had nothing to do with her. especially when it came to Ryan. Le Huan thought that if he was kind to her, then he was kind to everyone, but this was not so. Le Huan said she should have done something when people crossed the line, but she only realized it now. Le Huan said she now had to face the truth. Grandfather Le Huan looked proudly at his granddaughter. He really liked how she grew up. It was for her sake that he made a deal with Ryan when he came to ask if Le Huan really needed more arcanium. Ryan said that with arcanium supplies dwindling, they would have to conserve what they had and also gather as many stones as possible. For this reason, Ryan said that they needed to unite against the Etoile family. Ryan promised to give the Efekal family one of the Etoile mines. It was a worthy price. This was indeed exactly what Grandpa Le Huan needed at that moment, and it infuriated him since Ryan clearly knew about Le Huan's problems, but instead of offering help, he used the situation to his advantage. The grandfather accepted Ryan's proposal, but thought that he would never allow him to marry his granddaughter. Meanwhile, Marceau was thinking about what she needed to do first. It took Marceau about a month to convince the mages that she could be trusted, and she still had the option of leaving without arousing suspicion among those around her. Marceau was not like other ladies. She had already disappeared from society once. Nothing prevented her from doing it again. Marceau came to the store and asked them to pack all the toys for her, thinking that it would be easier to win the children over to her side. Marceau planned to give them not only toys, but also magical objects. Of course, it was part of Marceau's plan to gain the trust of the mages, but she also genuinely wanted to please the children. The children of magicians had to hide in this world. They lacked the emotions that were very important in childhood, so Marceau wanted to give them new experiences, dreams, and hope. If the mages have positive emotions from the magical items, then this could help to make a contract with them. They collected a whole mountain of gifts for Marceau, which the girl looked at with pride. Marceau thought that she would definitely need Darcy's help in delivering these gifts. Marceau was genuinely excited that she was finally starting to put her plan into action. When Marceau went outside, people immediately started whispering about the fact that apparently the girl had nowhere to put her money. Marceau thought that she should send some of the toys to an orphanage to hide her real purpose. The rumors really did spread. People were curious about why Marceau bought so many toys. Some speculated that Marceau was close to Darcy. One man said that it was indecent of Marceau to jump from one man to another. Unfortunately for this man, these words about Marceau were heard by Darcy, who was just passing by. Darcy asked if the man had heard that Darcy had recently broken down a door in the palace. Darcy added that the door was not the only thing he could have broken.